Time having arrived, I call the meeting to the Finance Committee to order, and I would ask you to please rise and help us salute our beautiful flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councillor Minichia.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'd like to just take a moment of silence tonight for a dear friend and Brocktonian, son of Brockton, Michael Mickey Campbell. Mickey, as everyone knows him in the city, was basically the mayor of Honeydew Donuts on Pleasant Street. He had Mickey was stood about this tall. His personality would fill these chambers. He was an athlete here in Brockton, but at a time when athletes actually smoked. And he lost his battle at COPD, but he loved this city. He was a fighter. He was a person who had the will to live. He had 18 lives, and today he gave up his fight. We love him. I love him. I miss him. And if you could share a moment of silence with me for Michael Mickey Campbell here in Brockton, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Welcome, everybody. So welcome to our second FinCom meeting of March. Mr. Clerk, item number one.
Item number one, we have the acceptance of the minutes of the March 4th, 2024 Finance Committee meeting.
Accepted and placed on file.
Item two, we have the appointment of Ms. Chris Lane Bonney of Prospect Street, Brockton, Mass. to serve on the Elections Commission for a 4-year term ending February 2028. Invited, Ms. Chris Lane Bonney.
Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any words for your representatives?
Good evening, and I am honored to serve as a commissioner for the election department. As you know, I worked there for, I think, more than 10 years under John McGarry, and now I'm working for the Brockton Housing as a director of the rental department.
And you missed this whole thing. That's why you want to come back. Councilors, any questions for Mr. Director?
Motion to affirmative.
Second.
The motion has been properly made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you for your service, and this will be recommended favorably to the whole City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilors, before we go to number three, in the interest of time, I'd like to see if Council Lally, if you can make a motion that we move number three to the end of the agenda so we can blow through the agenda a little quicker. Second.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we move item number 3 to the end of the meeting.
Second. Motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor? All those opposed? So moved. So number 4, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 4, ordered that the following petition be approved and submitted to the Greaton General Court for approval under Clause 1 of Section 8 of Article 2 as amended of the amendments to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and to the end that legislation be adopted precisely as follows, except for clerical or editorial changes of form only. An act relative to the election of the mayor, city council, and school committee in the city of Brockton. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives in general court assembled, and by the authority of the same as follows. Section 1, every mayor, city councilor, and school committee member who is elected to represent an individual ward or at large as the case may be, shall have been an inhabitant of a place within the ward, or for the positions of mayor or councilor at large, shall have been an inhabitant of a place within the city of Brockton for which he is chosen, chosen for election for at least 1 year immediately preceding his election, and shall cease to represent such ward or city for the positions of mayor or councilor at large when he shall cease to be an inhabitant thereof. Section 2, this act shall take effect upon its passage. Invited, Cynthia Hogan, Elections Commission Executive Director, City Solicitor Megan Bridges, or designee.
Ms. Hogan?
I believe she sent an email that we received an email, I thought you did too, that she was not going to be able to make it this evening.
Well, councilors, I'm actually the one that filed this motion. I think it's...
I'm sorry, there she is.
Okay, there she is. Madam, you're right on time.
We just read the act, the resolve.
Oh, I'm so sorry I was late. I was downstairs doing some work.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, then you know that I think it's a great idea to have some kind of residency for running for any kind of office in the city of Brockton. As you know, in the past few years, we've had several people who say they lived in Brockton, but we all know they didn't. So I would like to prevent some of that, I call it the Lawton effect, so that we don't have to deal with people that don't really live in the city and they just say they own a property, so now I live there, and then they run for mayor. So that's all I have to say on that. I'll take any questions.
Councilors, Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Karani. Thank you for being here. So we've had discussions about this over the last couple of years, off and on. So if we go forward with this and ultimately it is approved by the state legislature, what happens if we find out? Will you have access to, I don't know, investigatory information? Will you be looking for proof of residency? How will you use this to the city's advantage?
Well, when it comes to somebody who owns a property, there's not much I can do because I can't go to the owner of the property and say, do you live there? But when Kimberly Bobolis, who lived in Whitman, tried to run for mayor, she registered to vote, wanted to pull papers. I said, I don't believe that you live in Brockton. She gave us a hotel at first. I said a hotel's not a legal residence. She gave us some other address, which I had a police officer go over to that address to the owner of the house and ask him if she lived there. She didn't. I asked a Whitman police officer to go over to the house that she actually did live in with her husband, and the husband said she did live there. So we were able to prevent her from pulling papers, but when it comes to, like I said, if you own property in Brockton and you say you live at that property, I'm not really sure what my recourse would be.
Right. Even if it's the basement of a commercial restaurant?
Well, I had a problem with that when he said it, and then he said that, and I'm not going to mention any names, but he told me, well, I have other properties, I'll just register to vote at one of them, which he did. He used Chamberlain Court, the house right behind that said property. So I don't think that I think it was probably a rushed decision. I don't think that even if he had to live there for a year, I don't think he'll be there for a year. So
do you feel that this proposed home rule petition will help you?
I feel it will help everybody, the citizens of Brockton, because they will have elected officials who actually live in Brockton and care about Brockton, as opposed to, in my opinion, someone who wants to get something done. They have their own agenda, and that's why they're running.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening.
Good evening.
So just some of the nuts and bolts, and I think Councilor Nicastro brought up one of the issues about how do we verify. You said that you would seek some sort of, because this would take effect 1 year prior to the election. So that would be the first Tuesday of the year prior to the current election. Or could you just explain that part, this 1 year prohibition?
So if they want to run for office in November, then they would have to live in the city as of November, the year prior. They're signing something under the pains and penalties of perjury. It's not, we don't investigate everybody that registers to vote. Do they actually live there? But if we look in our VRIS system and see that they have been living there for a year, they've been at that address in our system, then I guess conceivably we could say that they live there.
Okay, so you'd be checking like tax records or something that they resided at that address.
I would be checking those, or the VRIS, did they register to vote when they came to Brockton?
And then secondly, this, this home rule petition also speaks to ceasing to, sorry, the ceasing of inhabiting the ward or the city in which they're elected to. What's the affirmative duty now, if this passes, of the elected official to inform the city that they have moved out of, out of the ward or city in which they represent? Are we putting a duty on them to make that announcement?
I think that would not apply to what I do in the elections office. That would be up to council.
Would we be able to make an
Your
order,
ordinances.
like a supplemental order off the initial home rule petition to require the disclosure? Or are we just leaving it up to, their
I don't know if
doing
the
it?
state law would have wording of that, in that effect, so I'd have to check on that, I don't know.
Yeah, is that something that's in our ordinances already?
One of the issues that we have nothing in the book that says anything at all as far as the time of residence before you run for office. So at least this is an initial step to make sure that, I think if we utilize the citizenship of Brockton, people know that you are required to live in this city for a year prior to running. I think it gives plenty of ammunition, even from the taxpayer standpoint, to basically, put you out there that you're not a resident of this city for a period of time in this sense. Prior to this, we really hadn't had anything in the books, so there was nothing we could do. But
Right.
at least we have something.
No, I understand the kind of the front-loaded part of the residency requirement the 1 year prior to the election. But this home rule petition also states that shall cease to represent the ward or city if they leave, if they no longer inhabit that ward or the city regarding their elected position. So I'm just wondering, are we now, how do we enforce that? Are we expecting that representative to make an affirmative communication to the city, informing us that they now no longer live in in their ward or city? Are we putting an affirmative duty on them to make that announcement?
I believe that was understood. If I'm a Ward 5 city councilor and I'm no longer living in the ward, that I would come out and communicate that with the voters of the city or the city itself. So now at least we're putting something in writing that says, you know what, you must do that. Because you can't, run for Ward 1 and then move on to Ward 7 and continue to represent the residents of Ward 1.
We have ordinances
we
in
have
place for that also.
So that's already in effect.
We have ordinances in place if you leave office, how we handle if someone doesn't live in their ward anymore. If it's close enough to an election, then we leave the seat empty. If it's not, we have a special election. We have ordinances in place for that.
Okay, because, there's just anecdotal stories of that not being followed within the last few years. So that's why I'm talking about the affirmative duty of that elected official to make that announcement.
The chairman has asked me, as a point of information, what the elections commissioner is referring to is not what you're referring to. We do have in the city charter how we replace, and we'll be doing it in the next few weeks, how we replace somebody who has left. But I believe what you're trying to get at is, do we have anything that says that person is obligated to inform the city that they've left? There is nothing presently. And in fact, in many cases, we've had people who moved
recently.
out, changed, couldn't finish a term, but they...
Through their goodwill or whatever.
But that, what is written here would not make them do that, no. Again, we have somebody we're going to be losing soon, unfortunately, but on the school committee side, they have informed the city they're moving. Currently there is nothing in what's written here, the way I read it. There's nothing in the city ordinances that says that you have to inform the city that you have to resign. There's nothing that says that.
Now, what if we learn that they have moved and they haven't made that communication? Can we enforce a resignation?
I don't believe so at this point. But I think we would need to have the law department opine in on that. And I don't know if Ms. Bridges is here. I don't know if she has preparation to answer that. I can't say for her, but...
Right. If we're on the topic, let's flesh it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm certainly not prepared to talk on it, and as a former member, I think, of the ZBA, Counselor, the rules can vary by board. It is the rules for which the board set for itself when there is no overarching law or policy that says otherwise. In order to advise you on this, I would certainly need time to research it and both the law and the way we operate here.
Now, so the Election Commission would be able to kind of fill in the blanks on this issue, or is that required from the council?
ZBA members, for example, the example I'm providing, they're not elected. So there's lots of different pieces that it touches, folks that have decision-making authority that may or may not be elected.
You're required to be, like if you're in Ward 1 or Ward 1, you're required to live in there. So if you don't live there and somebody finds out that you don't live there and you know they don't live there, then I would say that that's clearly written that you can't be.
No, that's if, I'm speaking of the situation in which you occupy, you lawfully resided or inhabited the ward in which you represent. Halfway through your term, you move, either to another ward or out of the city. It seems traditionally that person just remained in their seat until the end of their term. I'm just wondering, since we're filing a home rule petition that says that if they cease to live or reside within that ward or city, that they cease to hold that office.
I came in a couple minutes late. I have 3 kids and they were very hungry. Sorry about that. And Legislative Council isn't here tonight. So I think my best advice would be to move this to another meeting, because I'm not totally sure why the home rule petition is necessary, and I'd like the chance to speak to Shannon over it, Attorney Resnick, before we take a step forward on that. Because my understanding of the framework of residency rules as applying to elected office, the state law controls statewide offices and certain county offices and of the like, but local offices are controlled by local laws. So I'm not necessarily sure what the home rule petition would be asking for relief from. And it sounds also like from the preliminary conversation that we might need a little bit more work on when does the clock start, when does it stop, who does it apply to, how does the notice go out, all of those types of things, which could be locally created laws. Yeah, that's.
I mean, I tend to agree. It seems this is kind of like a, more general, more kind of aspirational framework in which we would like our elections to run without some of the specifics of how we, how we operate it specifically. When somebody moves out, exactly when are they required to inform? And I know our laws take over from there as to special election or keeping it vacant, but I just think potentially we might have to tighten this up before we send it to the legislature. And I'd love to hear your feedback on whether this could be accomplished via ordinance or it requires a home rule petition.
Well, that's the advice I hope to bring back to you, is that there might be a simpler approach.
Okay.
I would, the chairman asked me to opine in on this. I would recommend exactly what the attorney recommended, because time frame, we're talking about an election, 2 or 3 weeks isn't going to make a difference in moving this on. And currently there is no mechanism. In other words, even if we knew that you had moved out of Ward 5, this body does not have the right, I don't believe, to take you off the council. Only the voters can do that at this point. So that what you're trying to do probably needs to be put in here. But again, I would think Attorney Bridges and I do know that Attorney Resnick helped the chairman craft this, but to add in what you're talking about, I think I would recommend we postpone to the next finance meeting and let the 2 attorneys look into that part of it. Because, and I don't think holding it up one meeting is going to affect it, because we're talking about if it took effect on passage, it still has to get passage by the legislature is when it's going to happen, and 2 weeks isn't going to make a difference there.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I know this is you sponsor this, so if you have no objection.
No, I don't, because all I wanted to do is put something in the books, because right now we have absolutely nothing in the books. And this was copied basically, not verbatimly, but it was borrowed from the language that exists in Boston with their loss, because we know the problems that we've run into in the last couple elections here in the city. We want to make sure that we have, one, just the ability to prevent somebody from running into the city the night before the papers go out and seeking out an election in this city for a variety of positions. So we wanted to make sure there was something in the books, and that basically our counselor went through the Boston laws and copy supposedly the wordage pretty much verbatim.
No, I concur the need to tighten up this process.
I don't have any objections to postponing it until,
Right.
let me just hear, let's hear from, and then we can come back to the postponement. I think Councilor Azar
Yes, sir.
go next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Madam Director, and this has been long awaited for something like this. I know many of us have spoken on it. So from what I just the chairman mentioned, this is mirrored from Boston's, Boston has, did they go through a home rule petition, or has it always been, did they always have something
I
like
have
this?
no idea.
You have no idea?
It was not I didn't know that this was happening until I got the letter.
But I know you and I have had the conversation.
Oh,
The
yes.
state,
I've had the conversation with,
so the state does have this, the state has a law that requires anybody who runs for a state office to live within a year, correct? I believe.
I don't know the answer to that question
Okay.
either.
Then I guess the next question was going to be, have you asked what cities or towns have this type of residency type for elections? Have you looked into that at all, or?
I have not, no. I haven't looked into whether other cities and towns have the problem that we seem to have here in Brockton.
Okay.
Or that I've noticed in my tenure.
Okay, thank you. I also agree with our city solicitor that, if this doesn't have to be a home rule petition, I'd hate to have it go through that whole process if we can shorten it, because a home rule petition is a long process, so, thank you. Maybe I'll ask
I was thinking it was
our
a-
attorney next week. She may have the questions for those that I asked.
Well, as
She
I s-
mirrored it from
as
the
I said,
Boston.
she's the one that actually
Okay.
helped me draft this.
I'll
so,
ask her then. Perfect, that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Duranicourt.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for, coming, as always. In regard to residency, right? I mean, I know that, the post office, can determine a lot of that, whether or not somebody lives somewhere. Are you focused on primary residency or secondary residency? I mean, I know some people have two places where they live. So the question would be, like, which one is which? I mean, if somebody says that, well, I live down the Cape, but I have a house in Brockton as my secondary residency, would that be questionable? I mean, that could be for you too as well. How do you make that determination?
I would say, in order to run for office in the city of Brockton, Brockton should be your primary residence.
Well, this is what you would say, but is this...
Yeah, I mean,
is
that's,
this-
I believe the ordinances are in place that you have to live in the city.
I mean, it's like, I know that for a fact, I mean, based on, I have evidence that can prove it. I mean, like you stated, some people, didn't live here and then, boom, decided to run for office. And I also know that, in the past, where someone was representing a ward and, for whatever reason, decided to move to another ward, that person did not ask to resign or none of that. So with this particular, proposal, I'm assuming that would require that person either to resign. Like, what would be the requirement based on that? Because I know for a fact that there are people that with all good intention, living in certain wards, for whatever reason, they move to another ward and they continue serving their term, especially if they announce that they will not run for re-election. So with something like this, I'm assuming you can't do that. Would that be a true statement?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I would think that the city council would be making ordinances for this. I didn't know that it was a home rule petition that we would need.
Okay.
Since the state government or the city government takes care of the city government or their city and towns, we use the mass general laws a lot, but you as the councilors can make ordinances to make these changes, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, in regard to the question that I'm assuming Shirley Isaac, Council Isaac asked you earlier in regard to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, yeah, it is a fact that in order for you to run for certain things, you have to live there for at least a year. You know, that's an obligation. I mean, so maybe we do not have this. I'm assuming that we can ask our, solicitor. I think it's kind of like unjust to actually ask you those questions, given the fact that you are not our, solicitor. So I would leave it to our, City Council solicitor, and then we'll take it from there. So, but I appreciate your willingness to actually answer those questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Councilors, I just want to make sure that I don't lead you the wrong way here. What this item first came up, I asked our legislative counsel to help us draft an ordinance. She looked into it, and she says it's not an ordinance. It has to go through a home rule petition. And that's why, if it was a simple ordinance, I ought to file an ordinance. But it's not a simple ordinance, so we had to file. Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Just so you understand, councilors, the reason it has to go to a home rule petition, the rules governing this are in the city charter, and the city charter can only be changed by the legislature for us. So we're asking them to change the city charter to fix this. The reason understanding for the postponement is to make sure we completely ask all the questions we want when we send it into them. But that's the reason it has to be it can't just be done with an ordinance change. It is part of the city charter, the rules that guide this. And just to reinforce what Attorney Bridges said, the state oversees state requirements. The cities and towns, with the approval of the legislature, by this, in our case, the city charter, makes its own rules. So I think I would recommend strongly that we do the postponement, and that Attorney Bridges will work with Attorney Resnick to make sure that we've got the right questions in there. And again, we won't even lose any time because we've got a fifth Monday coming up anyway, so.
Then with that being the case, Mr. Chair, I make a motion to postpone agenda item number 4 until the next Finance Committee.
Second.
A motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor of postponement? All those opposed? It carries. Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Order number 5, whereas Chapter 324 of the Acts of 1990 was specifically enacted by the legislature.
I'd like to move, this is a very lengthy order, I'd like to waive the reading. It's posted on the website, it's posted on the FinCom agenda for this evening, and if that vote is approved, I'm going to ask that this be postponed as well. This is a pretty substantive order, and I want everyone to know what we're trying to do and be able to ask questions. So, motion to waive the reading and rely on the printed agenda.
Second.
A motion to waive the reading has been properly made in second. All those in favor? All those opposed?
All right, then I'll move to refer this to, motion to postpone this to let's go to the April 15th FinCom meeting. That will give us sufficient time.
Second.
Motion has been properly made to postpone in second. All those in favor of postponement? All those opposed? It carries. Look at this. I just saved you plenty of saliva.
Be able to sing later.
Number 6.
Item 6, ordered that the City Council votes to adopt and accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 32A, relative to publication of ordinances. Adoption of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 32A, will allow for publication of ordinances by the City Council in a municipal bulletin or printed pamphlet, except for zoning ordinances or amendments thereto, which will require a summary published at least 2 times in a newspaper of general circulation in the city. Invited Shannon Resnick, Legislative Counsel, Timothy J. Cruz, City Clerk. Unfortunately, Attorney Resnick couldn't be here. Do you mind if I stay here?
Please do.
I'll just, a quick explanation. This is just, there's a state law that if we accept it will allow us, any ordinance that we pass has to be advertised, obviously, before the ordinance meeting, and then also has to be advertised again in the newspaper on final passage, which we're just catching up. There were many that never were, and we're catching up on it. Zoning ordinances will still have to be published twice. This would allow us to only post, and we would post it online, obviously, and downstairs, the second advertisement. It'll probably save $4,000 to $5,000 a year for the city, and the state law kind of recognizes the fact that most ordinances don't really need the second advertising anymore. It's it's fairly archaic that we still have to advertise in a paper of record, a local paper of record, because that's really not where most people get their public, except for one, I'm sure we have a Globe report, and Enterprise. But it would just allow us to not advertise most ordinances the second time. Zoning ordinances are not affected. They will still have to be advertised twice. And I take any questions that anybody has.
Motion to recommend favorably?
Second.
Motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor of the resolve, right?
Order.
Order.
All those opposed? 8 carries. Thank you, sir. Number 7, please.
Item 7, order that the City Council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of the total grant funds in the amount of $50,000 from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, $50,000, to Parks and Recreation Department, $50,000. Invited Timothy Carpenter, Superintendent of Parks, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Carpenter.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, councilors. This is a $50,000 appropriation from the state FY24 fiscal budget. It was fought for and gotten by Representative Michelle Dubois. It is for improvements at Brockton baseball facilities. As you probably know, Downey Little League has combined with Brockton Baseball for this season. So a lot of these funds will be focused on what is called the Field of Dreams down at the Downey School. Some dugout repairs, some field repairs, hopefully maybe if there's some money left over, some upgrades to the scoreboard. All sort of in a push to maybe get some more regional tournaments to that field.
Councilors, Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Mr. Carpenter. Like you said, first I wanted to thank Representative Dubois for securing this grant. I'm involved with Downey Little League. They have a great complex, and due to the merger of them and Brookfield, this is really kind of the premier baseball complex in Brockton right now. These kids have gone without really a sufficient dugout in their facility, in their major league field. When it rains, they get rained on, they get muddy. There's no opportunity for them to really ride out a small rainstorm on the field with their teammates as that rainstorm passes. This will provide, make this complex a little more modern. These kids travel, the All-Stars, they travel all around, the South Coast. They go to other baseball complexes, see the modernity of those complexes, and Brockton, should have some of that as well. And so I believe this $50,000 will go a long way in improving that field, and as you said, make it more, make it more sufficient for regional tournaments and really show off the baseball skill of our Little League players. And so I just, again, thank you, Representative Dubois. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter, and I really look forward to seeing these improvements be made over the next few months. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Motion has been properly made in second to accept. All those in favor? All those opposed? And I want to also thank our state rep, Michelle Dubois, for being here tonight. Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for this. Keep this stuff coming.
Thank you.
The more the merrier. And I also want to thank our colleagues in the school committee who are here. I think I saw every single member of the school committee welcome as well.
Item 8, ordered that the City Council votes to adopt and accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 60, Section 3F, relative to voluntary donations to the city's veterans funds. Adoption of Mass General Law, Chapter 60, Section 3F will allow for the city to designate a place on its municipal property tax bills or motor vehicle excise bills or mail with such bills a separate form whereby taxpayers of the city may voluntarily check off, donate, and pledge an amount of money above the amount due on their tax/motor vehicle excise bill to contribute to the city's Veterans Assistance Funds. The Veterans Assistance Funds shall be under the supervision of the city's Veterans Services Department. Invited Kelly Young, Director of Veteran Services, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Ms. Young, welcome.
Thanks, Council President. Good evening, councilors. What we're talking about tonight is a fund that is created and it's funded by the residents of the city. So on your excise tax bill, there'll be an extra line where you can choose, it's not a fee, it's a choice, to add money to your payment, and it would go into this fund for veterans. And it's used for immediate assistance with food, transportation, heat, and oil expenses. That's what's written in the law. Those are the only things it can be used for vets or their dependents. And the way the law is written, it's up to the city's Veteran Services Department to come up with eligibility criteria and an application process. And I've talked to the treasurer. It's really feasible to get this out for the July tax bill if we have everything set by June. And then I have several other towns that we can kind of choose the best pieces of how they run theirs and apply that in Brockton. But ultimately, the eligibility criteria is going to depend on how quickly the balance rises in this fund, because it would be nice to say, you know, we have, according to the census, 3,400 vets. If we do it like, let's say Easton, they get 1,500 per household per year. That's $5 million. I don't think we'll have $5 million right away. So I think in their eligibility criteria for the financial criteria for income is 80% of the Bristol County median income, which is around $60,000 for a household of one. Plymouth County is very, very similar. But again, all that we'll have to determine as we see what the balance becomes. Can I answer any questions?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
On the motion.
Just on the motion, how is this different from the veterans assistance that the state reimburses us for?
Okay, so the Chapter 115 veterans benefits are for folks who are within 200% of the poverty level, which is around $30,000 a year. We have no say in that at all. And you put in the income, the shelter, their expenses, and it goes into a formula, and they give me out a benefit number, and then we can also reimburse for medical expenses. And again, the city and our department has no say in who's eligible, and we don't have a ton of flexibility on what that money can be used for. It's very specific on what the payments are and what they're for. This allows us to choose our financial eligibility criteria. So what that means is, let's say we go with that, just for the sake of this explanation, that $60,000 income cap annually. Right now, if you call our office and you make over, like $32,000 a year, we can't directly help you. We have to refer you out to another agency and hope that you qualify for something else. Let's say self-help. Self-help has a little bit of a higher income cap than us. But with this, we can, if you call us and you make between that $30,000 where you're not eligible for Chapter 115, but you're still not really comfortable getting a tank of oil, we could help you from $30,000 to $60,000. So there's a whole new demographic of vets and their dependents that we can assist with this.
All right, thank you.
All set, Councilor?
Thank you.
On the motion, Councilor.
On the motion, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, Madam Director. You just brought something up. Do we have a large number of veterans that are getting less than 30,000? I mean, is there, because that was a big question when we were working on, Father Bills was building the homeless near Jack's Place down on the north side for veterans. So we're just wondering, what is the number?
Yep, so when I almost have 2 years in this position, believe it or not. So when I started, we had close to 100 folks on the Chapter 115 program. And because of I'm going to call it a housing crisis, we're down to between 60 and 70 for the last payment we ran at the beginning of March. And that's because folks can't afford to live in the city and they're moving to Taunton, New Bedford, Fall River. It's just south, any place where it's cheaper, or out of state is really common as well. So today on 115, we have, let's say 65 is pretty close to being accurate. I suspect there are more spouses and adult children who are disabled before the age of 18 who could qualify. They just don't know about the program, which is why we've been doing such aggressive outreach.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam. Councilor, go ahead.
Yeah, on the motion, I just want to personally thank you for, all that you have done since you went back on that world, and especially on behalf of our veterans. I strongly believe that, we owe them, everything that we can possibly do. And, when it's come down to our veterans, there's nothing, more or at any expense that, we shouldn't embark on. And I wish you nothing but the best in that world, and hopefully that will pass and our veterans will get what they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure and my honor to do this work.
Anyone else? Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be quick. First, good evening, Ms. Young. Completely on board for this order. I think it being specific to some critical needs of our veterans, especially food and heat, oil, those are life-saving issues. And so the fact that we could direct additional funds through the kindness of our taxpayers, voluntarily kindness, I think it's a good idea. I was just asking, I know that you said that if this is approved, then your department would begin kind of drafting eligibility requirements. I was hoping that potentially maybe just, you could involve maybe one of the city councilors in that drafting process, to get some of our feedback. And then when it is finally drafted, if, that councilor could file a resolve to bring you back to kind of lay out what those eligibility requirements are. I think that would be a good idea in this situation.
I concur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Nicastro on the motion.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Ms. Young. I researched the law, everything that he said, and I just think you'll have another tool in the toolbox. What the law says is money in the fund shall be used to provide support for veterans and their dependents in need of immediate assistance with food, transportation, heat, and oil expenses. That's perfect. And I, for one, my family will contribute to this. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? Motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor? All those opposed? It carries. Mr. Clerk.
Item number 9, ordered that the following named sum be and the same is hereby transferred as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $1,250,000 from overlay surplus, $1,200,000. From police department full-time salaries, non-overtime, $50,000. To law department court judgments, $1,250,000. This transfer will be to fund a court settlement for a recently settled lawsuit. Invited John O'Donnell, Chair, Board of Assessors, or designee. Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer. City Solicitor Megan Bridges, or designee.
Colleagues, I got a letter from our chairman of the Board of the Assessors who said he cannot be here today, but we do have a very capable city solicitor who will come up and explain this to us. Madam Solicitor.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. I sent them late today, but I sent you all some notes that I'll review briefly at the podium. What I'm asking for tonight is funding for a settlement for a lawsuit that totals $3.75 million. It's a structured settlement, $1.25 million in this fiscal year, $1.25 in next fiscal year, and the same the last year. And essentially the facts of the case are a woman from Brockton was accused along with her cousin of burning down their parents' home, grandparents' home, while they were inside. It's the Choi case for folks that are familiar with it, and it happened in 2011. She spent 17 years in jail, and in 2020, due to a myriad of factors, which include new expert evidence of gasoline, allegedly new evidence regarding Brockton Police's ability to record audio, plaintiff's criminal defense counsel's failure to introduce a statement from an independent witness, evidence about additional fires involving the other individual involved, and evidence of racial bias by prosecuting attorneys. A combination of those factors supported a judge deciding that Ms. Choi's conviction should be vacated. So she spent 17 years in jail. And then subsequently, she sued the Commonwealth and the state police actors, as well as the city, and certain city employees regarding the actions that she says alleged to her wrongful conviction. In November 17th of 2023, the city mediated the case with a federal magistrate. And in general, as the rule of thumb, and it's just that, a rule of thumb, but set by Judge Nancy Gertner, is the baseline for every year of wrongful conviction that you spend in jail is approximately $1 million. So what I'm bringing to you tonight is a settlement that I think is in the city's best interest, and in terms of risk evaluation of where the case could go. The Commonwealth has also settled, and for an amount that I have not seen any paperwork on, but I understand is more than $3.75 million. So what has happened in terms of the city finances is the Board of Assessors met. They determined their necessary revenue that needs to be kept on hand and released $1.2 million for you all to decide whether to approve or not to support the transfer. And then the additional $50,000 is from the police budget.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
All right, a motion has been properly made in second. I know there's a couple of councilors, so on the motion, Councilor Castro.
Thank you.
And then Durant Court.
On the motion, good evening, Attorney Bridges. Thank you for being here. I have a question for Mr. Clarkson.
So do I.
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson.
Good evening.
So talk to us for a minute about an overlay surplus.
So every year, as part of your overall appropriation, you put money into the overlay account. That account exists for the purpose of funding abatements when people apply for a property tax abatement, or for settlements if someone is aggrieved by a decision of the Board of Assessors and takes that case to the appellate tax board, or, which is allowed but rare to the county commissioners, the city sets aside money every year to be able to pay those settlements. Money is put in every year, and if settlements are not required, then money accumulates in that overlay fund. So there's a process by which money is then released from overlay into overlay reserve. So overlay reserve is the account that captures monies that are accumulated in overlay. Some councilors that have been here for some time may remember that we underwent a similar process to release money from overlay into overlay reserve to fund the Lopes settlement a few years back. Probably 4.5 years back now. And so in a similar process, the mayor recently made a request to the Board of Assessors to determine what, if any, additional funds existed in overlay that could be released from overlay reserve. They determined that that amount was $1.2 million, which was not sufficient to cover this entire settlement. That's why there's an additional amount requested to be transferred from the police budget. So that's an overview. I should tell you that these days we are in constant contact with the Department of Revenue, generally over the issues related to the school deficit, but on a larger sense and related to all of the city's finances. And there is guidance from the Department of Revenue that suggests that communities should have a more robust balance in their overlay than many communities have. The calculation that the Board of Assessors used to make this money available was to calculate the number of outstanding cases and then a 5-year average of amounts that were used to abate. And when they made that calculation, which I will gladly share with you, they determined that there was the $1.2 million available. It is possible, and when we have discussions with the DOR about this, that they may offer a different interpretation of the guidance and require a greater amount to be in the overlay. If that occurs, then we will seek to ask you to transfer these funds from within the operating budget. But we need to have those conversations with the DOR. So I would suggest that in order to move this forward, that you pass this tonight. And if there is a change that's required, we will come back to you and seek the transfer from another source in the budget.
Thank you. I did inquire today, and I understand there is a budget there is a balance in the overlay of $3.9 million. So deducting the 1.2 tonight, if we do vote to favorably recommend that, means we will be left with 2.7 million in the overlay. Do you believe that that is adequate?
I do, because it exceeds the 5-year average of monies that have been required. The lingering question, and the reason why I raised it to you in full disclosure is, I believe that is the method by which generally boards of assessors calculate whether or not there's money available. And it's certainly the method we used to calculate the availability of the LOPE settlement. But in deference to the Department of Revenue, if they offer a stricter interpretation, then we will certainly comply with that. And that's the conversation we have not yet had.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor, the Writing Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clarkson, in regard to, coming back to this council for more money, I do have a few questions. So, the law department budget for property insurance is over by $200,000. Was this budget under projected? If yes, why haven't you come to the council to request a transfer as you did for court judgment?
So I can answer that. I see the solicitor standing up, and I'm sure she's happy to answer that as well. We have been in contact and in communication between my office and the law department. There are costs that could not and were not predicted that depend on market conditions. The cost for the city's insurance far exceeded our estimates, and so you'll see in the budget report that I've provided to you, there's a deficiency there. And there are other settlements that were required by the court. And so we are putting together a transfer request that you will see here at the council to address those shortages in the law department.
Excellent. So another question. What expenses are paid from the property insurance line?
Generally, just we have insurance for cybersecurity. The regular property and casualty insurance that covers our buildings and our automobiles and those sorts of things.
Okay, another question. Has the city paid for all of the court judgment case?
Could you repeat the question?
Of course, Mr. CFO. Has the city of Brockton paid for all the court judgment case? If not, based on the budget provided, what is the city obligated to pay for FY 2024? Will the transfer be enough?
So I can answer and then ask the solicitor to join in. The answer is no. The reason why this transfer is before you is because there's an outstanding judgment that needs to be paid. As to whether or not there are any others, I'll defer.
I'm confused. Can you explain what you just said?
Yes, there's a judgment that the solicitor just described to you that has not yet been paid. That's why we're seeking this transfer.
The question is, other than this one, right? Other than that one.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say other than this one.
Oh, well, the question, let me just repeat the question for you, if I may. Has the city of Brockton paid for all of the court judgment cases? That was my question. If not, based on the budget provided, what is the city obligated to pay for FY 2024? Will there be any transfer? This was my question.
Councilor Durennan-Court, can I step back to the property insurance just to give you a little bit of framework? So between finance and law, the insurance program for the city is managed. Automobile insurance, certain building coverage, we're self-insured for general liability, but we insure all buildings in case of, certain catastrophic loss or things like that. We have cybersecurity insurance, and the policies don't always line up with the fiscal year. So we do our best to ask for the city for as much money as we need. But, for example, the cybersecurity policy is renews in October, I believe. And so that one came in more than we had in the budget. So that's on insurance. We can give you the policies, we can talk to you if you have any ideas, but about how we shop around, but that's the program. And so any claims on the policies are managed through my office. That's we pay the bills in the law department. The court judgments, the law allows deficit spending in court judgment line items. So the ones that are identified in the expense report you received today from the CFO's office, there are other cases on the horizon that have settlement demands made on the city. But at this juncture, there are no contemplated settlements other than what's in front of you and what has been paid.
So, and of course, this is to you, Mr. Clarkson, as the CFO. So, for FY24, Mr. Clarkson, so, let's just put it to you like this. I understand your department has been taking a lot of responsibility, a lot of unforeseen responsibility due to the fact of the situation that we are dealing with. My obligation as, somebody who represents the entire city is to making sure that, when it's come down to, spend our tax money, we do it accordingly. And of course, you as the CFO, it is your job, it is your responsibility to not just, educate us, but also let us know what's going on. And obviously, by virtue of your knowledge and based on your experience, I'm assuming that whatever you give us, that's what we have. So the question that I'm asking you, I just want to make sure that, although, I will be supporting the request, I just want to know, what's coming next. And if we do have something on the pipes, I just want to, how do I put this? I just want to be, cornered by virtue of coming here, voting yes or no on money, when I know that, we are dealing with a deficit. And that's not going to happen, under my watch, based on my responsibility. And that's why I'm asking you those questions. So if we have, more, request, if you assume that you will come back to this council requesting more money, I just want to know, because it is your job. You know it better than all of us. And I'm assuming you know the numbers. I don't. I'm a number guy, but not based on what you do. So I think it is important for me to have the knowledge that I need. And when I'm talking to, the voters out there, so I can tell them exactly what's going on, and that would be based on your own statement. That's why I'm asking you this question. So do you plan on coming back requesting for more money? That's my question too.
And I fully understand the question, Councilor. I think based on what the solicitor has said, this is one of those things that is unpredictable. The city could be faced with a lawsuit tomorrow that the mayor and the solicitor decide before the end of the fiscal year is appropriate to settle. So my answer to you is I certainly hope not, that we won't require more funds, but I certainly don't. I think it would be irresponsible of me to offer you a categorical guarantee that we won't be back, because this is one of those categories that is not predictable.
So it's like as of right now, right? As of today, based on what we are dealing with, so you can honestly say that that's what we are looking at. I understand tomorrow there might be. I hope not. Well, I hope not. I hope we don't have another one. So, based on what we are dealing right now, this is the amount that you are requesting, and you don't assume that there will be another one. I just want to make sure that I don't want to say that, well, we don't know, there's a possibility. That's not an answer for me. It's like, based on what we have, according to the evidence that we have as of right now, you don't believe that there will be another request. The next...
Councilor, I am intent on answering the question directly and honestly, but you're asking me to provide an answer that's difficult to provide. The solicitor just said that there are other cases they're working on, so there may be some settlements before the end of the year. I can't tell you that definitively. What I can say is that I certainly hope that there aren't other requests that we make, but it wouldn't be honest of me to offer any definitive answer because, again, this is one of those categories, unlike salaries or other fixed costs within the budget that are clear, this is one of those where the nature of lawsuits and settlements is unpredictable. So do I hope that we don't come back? Am I fairly certain? Yes, but I don't want to offer you a definitive and then lose credibility if in fact we have to come back to you before June.
So your answer is no?
Counselor, I think my answer has been clear. I am not offering a definitive answer because I don't feel as though I can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Tavares on the motion.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I just have one question. The settlement is going to be affected the taxpayer?
It is paid with public funds, yes.
Can you explain with the detailed definition how it's going to be affecting the taxpayer?
My hope, as I stand here and I live in these borders also, is that there would be no tangible effect on the taxpayer. What I'm bringing you tonight is a settlement that rights a wrong for someone who was found to have spent 17 years in jail wrongfully incarcerated. That was what a judge found in the lower court that overturned a conviction. So, Councilor Tavares, part of what the comments of the CFO were saying was that these funds are identified from a place where it would hopefully not affect the taxpayers in any sense. That lawsuits happen, public corporations, private corporations, and everybody in between, and then you know, the hope is always that you identify ways to resolve it that don't affect the way that you operate.
Thank you so much. This will have it tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. We've already done this once. By law, we're not allowed to regurgitate this.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, that's going to be quick. It's going to be very quick. It's for her.
When you say quick, what do you mean by quick? Your quick or our quick?
We'll find out, Mr. Chairman. It's going to be quick, so simple. To new residents. So can you tell us how many lawsuits are we currently facing? Do you have this information? If not, you can always email it to us if you don't feel comfortable relaying it right now.
Of course, we keep the data, so I can provide you the data.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. See, that was quick.
That was quick. I was shocked. We have nothing else about this? We're all good with this? A motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor of this order? All those opposed? The order carries. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, number 10.
Item 10, resolve, whereas the traffic pattern for Warren Avenue between Spring Street and Belmont Street will eventually be modified as part of the new public safety campus at Warren Avenue and West Elm Streets. Now therefore be it resolved, DPW Commissioner Patrick Hill be invited to a meeting of the council to discuss the details and work necessary to accomplish the proper objectives. Invited Patrick Hill, DPW Commissioner, Captain Mark Porcaro, Traffic Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, Captain, welcome.
Councilors.
You guys flip a coin and decide who's going to go first.
I can go first. So this project is being done to accommodate the new public safety building. There were, several different traffic patterns that were presented to the Traffic Commission over a period of 3 different meetings. The final decision was made to change Warren Ave from Belmont Street to Spring Street to 2A. In doing that, we have to widen all the intersections. Goddard Road is being redone. We've also done some water main work downtown to shore up some infrastructure that's in the ground to make sure that when this building opens that we don't have any failures in the infrastructure which could prevent timing for a public safety response. So as part of this project, we have been looking through and have changed all of the traffic signal equipment. We realigned Highland Street, all new sidewalks from Belmont Street to Pleasant Street, there's a bike path on Warren Ave heading in the southerly direction. Completely reconstruction of the roadway. We've updated all the stormwater. We've lined all the sewer pipes. There'll be all new traffic signals and pavement markings, all new intersections at West Elm Street, Frederick Douglass Ave, Highland Legion Parkway, all new traffic signal equipment with using new signal detection cameras, something that the city has been trying to move to for several years now. It also includes the purchasing of that software so that the preemption will run through a GPS pattern now. All new street lighting, new smart trash cans, all new air quality sensors, in several different areas where we'll be using flexible pavement to accommodate the stormwater permit. So I provided you all with a temporary cost, or I guess an estimated cost to date. I'll note that the plans are only at 75% design. Some of those contingencies in the documentation that I offered you will come down. We're still working on final plans. We expect to be at 90% within the next couple of months. At that time, some of those contingency costs will go away. But all in all, this project with takings for the road, give or take, is going to be about $15 million.
I was just gasping there for air. Captain, do you have anything else you want to add to this, or?
Nothing. The commissioner said far more than I could have. The only thing I would add is the plan that he just spoke of was presented to the Traffic Commission at a special meeting over 2 years ago, back in February of 2022. We had a principal engineer and a landscape architect from 2 different private firms present to the Traffic Commission. It was open to the public. We had discussion, review, and we eventually voted upon and approved what was known as Alternative 2, which was to make Warren Ave two-way from Spring Street southerly to Belmont Street. That's been the bulk of the Traffic Commission's involvement with this.
Councilor Azak, and then Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioner, Captain. So I was on the Traffic Commission the year that they came before us, and so thank you for the update. That's a lot of things are being done, Commissioner. So in reality, to me, there's no way we could have done this public safety building without Warren Ave being two ways. I mean, so this is something I believe that we had to do. I mean, there was no option, I think, to have the fire trucks going opposite, you know, as the traffic was kind of, I think that would have created pure chaos. But, so I heard everything you just mentioned, Commissioner, but I know we had talked about possibly Main Street also going 2 ways. I don't know if that's even still in the future, if that's still an option, but, and I don't want to sidetrack us, but...
Not to sidetrack, but the city did get a $7.8 million grant from the federal government to study downtown.
Yes.
That's to study the rest of the downtown corridor, Main Street, Montello Street, and all the streets in between. So to design and get that project ready, construction ready.
So that would include that area of Main Street?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Councilor. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Commissioner and Captain. So, I mean, the plan's a great plan, a Cadillac plan you have there with all the work that's going to be done on Warren Ave. But the headline here is obviously the cost of $15 million to rework this street. Now, out of the originally appropriated $98 million, what was allocated for this work?
I wasn't involved necessarily with that, Council, but my understanding is there was $4 million.
So this would essentially $11 million cost overrun of the initial $98 million?
I think the project that went in with the public safety building, the understanding was that Warren Ave was going to be changed. Only a small section of Warren Ave was going to be changed from West Elm Street to Legion Parkway. So the money that was allocated was based off a study that was only done on that area. When that was presented to the Traffic Commission, that was not the choice that the Traffic Commission made.
Okay, so that decision and the allocation was made prior to a fuller discussion of whether it was sufficient for the job that we intended it to accomplish, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just trying to, and I guess maybe Mr. Clarkson, this would be better directed to you. So we had Suffolk in here a few weeks ago talking about a potential $34.5 million cost overrun for the public safety complex. Would this be an additional $11 million to that estimated cost overrun?
So one of the things that the DPW commissioner and I have been working on is looking to find other sources of funding to mitigate some of these costs, including additional grants. We were able, actually, on top of the $7 million grant that Pat mentioned, his team, working with our team, obtained $1.5 million, what's called a SMART grant, and that money will be able to be, all of it, used to purchase equipment for this two-way traffic. There are other grants that we have available and others for which we are applying. There are opportunities because in addition to the road work, we'll be replacing perhaps some sewer and water pipes to use existing sewer and water bonded funds for projects that have been approved. We also have the opportunity to use some state-provided Chapter 90 monies. So we're putting together a plan where we can reduce that overall number by a pretty significant number. So when we come to you and ask for the authorization to borrow additional funds to complete the project, yes, that will be inclusive of the two-way traffic, but we will be able to bring that portion of the cost down with other sources of funds.
And when do you estimate you coming before us to make that request?
Well, as I mentioned when we discussed it previously, because of both of the pace of the project and our desire to actually borrow the funds next fiscal year, which would make the first payment not due until the next year. Excuse me, I didn't mean to put my hand in your face. That we would anticipate that request coming to you sometime this summer.
Okay. And so obviously I would assume that other than there'll be additional amounts more than the 34.5 that was estimated by Suffolk. And so you'll be coming back asking for essentially, I don't know what the number will be, but obviously tens of millions of dollars more. And then the recent news of a potential, bonding downgrade, the cost of borrowing will obviously increase. And so we'll be, more, paying more on our debt load moving forward from the public safety complex. My question is, with everything that we have going on, particularly the school deficit and any other potential deficits that arise by the end of the fiscal year, I think the city's got to start prioritizing. Is there any contemplation of potentially getting that site, the public safety complex site, basically pad ready, and then putting a timeout on the, on moving forward with that public safety complex so that, we're not incurring these additional costs, and maybe, because the public safety, the borrowing of that money and the contemplation of building that complex was done in a completely different fiscal time. At that time, we were joking about being flush with cash, right? And that, the borrowing was 2.3%, and that is no longer the case today. Just saying, is there any discussions in the city of getting this pad ready, putting a pin in it, and then waiting until we better understand what our deficits are, better understanding of how this borrowing affects our overall debt load, how that could potentially squeeze out our ability to manage our current deficit, and we're just adding more and more debt onto our city. Is there any contemplation that we put a timeout on the public safety complex and wait for a better economic environment to move forward on that project?
So I can answer the question this way, because I think the answer to the question from my perspective, and let me be clear, I'm offering you my financial perspective, is no. We're already under contract to construct the building and have a contract in place to move forward. And you are correct, if there are impacts to our bond rating because of the current issues with the school deficit, there will be a greater cost to borrow money. However, I think there are costs, some of them quantifiable, some of them not, to actually halting this transformational project. So again, I don't want to answer definitively, have there been any discussions on that, because but I am not aware of any, and certainly if my opinion was sought on that, I would say that that would not be a preferred way to go.
All right, I mean, would this borrowing and the increase in the debt load have any additional effect on our bond rating?
So anytime the city borrows money, there is, prior to the issuance of the debt, the rating agencies conduct a review of your current rating, and then they rate each borrowing event. And so given all of the issues that are swirling around right now, I would suggest that the other challenges we face would be more impactful to our rating than seeking additional funds to complete this project. But, and I guess this is the night for non-definitive answers, but I can't answer that definitively whether or not, because that's a judgment call that's made by the rating agencies. But certainly, the conditions under which we would go to market right now are far less than ideal.
Okay. So you said that we already have a signed contract with Suffolk, but we signed a contract without full financing for the project?
No, and if you have specific contractual questions, I would yield to the solicitor. But at the time the project was bid, we had borrowed sufficient funds, and there were obviously changes to that based on the conditions we've discussed with you.
Okay, so we're essentially, since we signed the contract with Suffolk, we're obligated now at this point to achieve the financing necessary. I don't feel as though I'm qualified to answer that question. That's a legal question, Counselor. Okay. Lastly, so I'm just a little confused and upset that do we have any recourse against the original contractor or the original consultant that told us that a completed public safety complex would be $98 million. I mean, Commissioner Hill just stated that they contemplated a small part of the two-way traffic that would, and then upon further review, that wasn't sufficient. Obviously, $98 million isn't sufficient. When we had Suffolk before us, there was discussion that borings or, that there was no understanding of the building being pinned to the rock. Ledge, sorry. That there was, that nobody knew. What wasn't, and I know this might be a little far afield, but I'm just, want to get out that we had an original contractor that did not identify the ledge, that did not identify the extended contamination of the land. Do we have any recourse that we went forward without these understandings, and now we're finding out that we're essentially $50 million over budget?
What I can say to you, Counselor, because I was at that same meeting that you were at, and what I believe that the OPM provided you at that meeting was a list of more than a dozen projects in a dozen communities with similar dynamics, because at the time, and I stood before all of you, this was actually on a Zoom, when you authorized the borrowing of the $98 million, and at that time, public projects were bidding out somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 per square foot. And now we're starting to see downward pressure on those numbers. But as the folks from CHA explained to you, in this period, we're seeing projects that are bidding out at $800 per square foot. So I think there are certainly factors here in Brockton and throughout the Commonwealth that were demonstrated where there were pressures on building costs that could not have been predicted at that time.
And I agree with that statement, building costs, but we're talking about ledge that exists.
Councilor,
okay, I'm just saying that, okay, understood.
I understand how frustrated you are, because we're all frustrated, but we need to stay focused on this particular aspect of the
But it's
resolve.
correct, and I apologize.
Let's bring him again, and then we can beat him up some more.
And there's no intent to beat up, but it's just that this is, just an additional, additional monies that we weren't prepared for, that are significant, and that our cost of borrowing has increased. We're trying to deal with the deficit, and I'm just saying there's got to be some prioritization on what's more important, what's most important. That's really all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Lally, and then Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To sort of take off from where Councilor Thompson was, questions on what we can afford is sort of the topic of the day. Four 8-figure deficits in a row is not a flush budget make. A quick question for Solicitor Bridges, and this might not be something that you are able to answer off the top of your head, but I figured I might as well ask it.
Well, she's not on this, but if there's any objections, Solicitor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going off of where Councilor Thompson was driving, but sort of not as far down the road, off the top of your head, do you know if there's any provisions or anything in the contract that we have that would allow us to take some kind of freeze or pause or any kind of relief for us in there? And sort of an extension of that, would there be any penalties for us to do so? Is it not really beneficial in a cost way?
So the way the contract is structured, and this is what the law requires, the city has an owner's project manager, and the city is using a model that's called construction manager at risk. And so the Code of Massachusetts regulations outline the factors in utilizing that approach, as well as what's required in selecting both your OPM and your contractor, and the terms of your contract to a certain degree. I don't have the contract here, and I'm not necessarily sure if this forum is the appropriate one for advice.
Right. This is a little away from the resolve, and I do apologize.
And sequencing the advice might be important. The questions are certainly important, but I couldn't provide you anything of substance right now.
I appreciate it. Just wanted to get the question out there. And you're not on the resolve, so I do appreciate, getting up. My question, I don't know who would take it, but this is for Warren Ave only?
Correct.
Right. So, and I think you were highlighting the scope earlier, Commissioner, but can you just hit, again, for the folks at home, why so much for just the street? I know you're talking about piping. Is the piping a necessity? Is that something we should do while we're down there?
Well, I will say that, you know, some of the piping that is being done on Warren Ave has already been done and is not being done through this project.
Yeah.
So the water work was done separately through a separate appropriation that was through the water budget. We replaced all the water mains and will continue to replace all the water mains on Frederick Douglass, L Street, Green Street, all of Warren Ave and West Elm between Warren and Main Street. That is done entirely separate of this project. Goddard Road, entirely separate of this project.
All the way to East Ashland? Yeah, that's the SRF money.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that is not SRF funded.
That's not the SRF money.
That is not SRF funded.
That's what we bonded out.
For the $19.1 million appropriation.
Yes. Okay.
Goddard Road is being changed to two-way. That is not part of this project. We're able to, probably going to end up using money out of that water project to pave that road, to widen it a little bit. But yes, this project, just Warren Ave, that's the cost.
Okay. And obviously, you know, you highlighted widening, there'd be changes in signalization. How would you foresee this sort of impacting the people around it, you know, property owners around or up and down Warren Ave?
Well, it's going to be a phased approach, so it's going to be section by section, you know, West Elm, between West Elm and, you know, Belmont Street. That section of Warren Ave will be done in a phase. The next phase will be the next section up, which would be Frederick Douglass or even Legion Parkway to West Elm. It'll be phased. There'll be one lane of traffic open on each side. All that stuff is kind of under design right now. Part of the design is the detours and you know, construction, the way they phase the construction, so.
Fair enough. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you being the bearer of this news. I know this is yours to execute, not to design. But I will take, given precedent that he was already up, can I get Mr. Clarkson?
Absolutely.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Just don't go as long as some of the other councilors from that side of the
I'm
road.
doing my best, Counselor. Mr. Clarkson, this might not be something that you can answer right off the top of your head, and, you know, we can circle back with it, but, you know, the most recent federal, you know, bills relating to infrastructure, can we recoup any of this expense through them?
So we meet frequently, Pat, myself, our grant writers, a representative from the mayor's office, as a group, and are very actively involved in trying to capture as much infrastructure money as we can. It was through that collaboration that we obtained the $1.5 million SMART grant. There are other grants that have been awarded, so the answer to that question is an emphatic yes. We are working, we have 2 grant writers working full-time, trying to capture every penny we can. And I know even in addition to SMART,
Complete Streets, we get a $500,000.
So I think our record in the last year or more is exemplary in obtaining as much as possible in terms of grant funds, and we will continue to do that. And this is a little far afield, Mr. Chairman, but that leads me to suggest that perhaps we could bring our new grant writers in on a resolve, because I think it would be an opportunity to really give you the full scope of the work that they're doing and the millions of dollars we're being able to bring into Brockton through our aggressive pursuit of grants.
I think we would appreciate that, and the taxpayers would appreciate that as well. Go ahead, Councilor.
I'd be happy to file it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, and I don't know who would take this, and I do appreciate the mayor being here as well. The last, and this might actually go to him. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I know you'd jotting down some notes. So when you were here recently, we focused more on the building itself.
Correct.
And we didn't really cover the scope of the road work. Why, I guess, I don't want to be too blunt with it, but why didn't we touch on both in the last result?
Well, I think it was mentioned in passing, but they're incorporated separately, right? Even though you can't have one without the other. I've said that. You can't have the building without the two-way. You can't do two-way without the building. But I can say Pat is coming to my office weekly to give me updates. The old McMenemy's on the corner of Pleasant and Warren Ave, there's going to have to be a taking there, so they'll have a radius turn for the fire trucks, because they couldn't make that turn right now. So that's a cost. And again, it goes from Spring Street all the way down to Belmont Street. So, you know, I'm not happy with this. None of you are. At the end of the day, we try to have to figure out how we can minimize the cost. But right now, this is what we're faced at, and I'm hopeful that Pat and Troy will come back and have some modified numbers. That's the goal, and that's the mission I've told them to do.
Well, I appreciate it, and it is, you know, the city side has had, you know, a pretty good operation budgetarily, so, you know, this is something that sort of sticks in our teeth. And so that's really it, Mr. Chairman. I just would express my, you know, disappointment in the difference between the, you know, initial cost and the cost we're at now. And I look forward to getting a little bit more information about the contract and reviewing the feasibility of, you know, the options that have been laid out tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Clerk. I was going to say Clerk. Councilor Lally.
No comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I would develop another option for just Spring Street to Warren Ave. I mean, I think we've got to have a menu of decisions to make if we need to lower cost. And if that comports with what the fire department needs for their runs that will go out of the central fire station, that will be part of the new public safety facility, I think we should do that. If we can't go all the way down to Belmont Street, then because of cost implications, then so be it. And by the way, Commissioner, the city through the planning department did study two-way traffic on Main Street. There should be a report up in the planning office, and it was $29 million for both infrastructure and road work and new signalization. A couple of things that I always want to mention. Why are we talking about a new public safety facility and at this location? The police station, unless I'm wrong and the chief is here, that has mold and dampness, and it also has air quality problems. As far back as when I was mayor, the state stepped in and said, you've got to have a better air changing system because it's not fair to the prisoners who are being held down in the cell block. We have new divisions within the police department now with cyber crimes and communications, and we're not building this just because we want to build it. We're building it because we've outgrown the old police station that I believe, and I should know this, was built in the late 60s, if I'm not mistaken. So we're talking something over 50 years old. Why put the central fire station where it is? They did an analysis of the emergency runs. That was the location chosen because that's the majority of the runs that go out of that station, and you need to facilitate the movement of the emergency vehicles. Councilor Thompson is right. We are frustrated. It is amazing how the school deficit has permeated down into everything that we're doing in this city. It's stunning. There's no other way to describe it. And we will have to be careful. We do have to establish priorities. I have no problem looking into the issues that were raised about why didn't we know more about ledge? Why didn't we know more about the toxic materials that were buried there by the city when we took down the old A building for the high school? I wish the city had done something differently years ago, and we wouldn't have incurred what I understand to be substantial cost to truck that toxic material, I believe, to Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. We're all frustrated, but I would not halt the project because if the costs have escalated to $800 per square foot now, let's assume for the moment you did do that. You waited a couple of years. We could be up over $1,000 a square foot. You could see the price increase even more. So I think we've charted a course. That course has been interrupted by another city department that didn't contain costs. But I would caution any of us from putting the public safety building project aside because there's a critical need for it for the fire, the police, emergency management, and information technology. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioner. Good evening, Captain. I concur with Councilor Farwell. The public safety complex is essential for the city. Our public safety professionals deserve a new headquarters. I just have a couple questions for you, Commissioner. The $50 million for the road work and shutting down some of the roads, that's going to incur quite a few police details. Was that number for the details factored into this override?
It is. It's in the documentation that I provided you. I mean, it's a cost estimate based on hours. This is basically just over a construction season. About $1 million worth of police details are factored into that.
As far as duration, start to finish this, do you have an estimate how long it would take?
It's like 430 days, I think, from start of construction.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilman Minichiello.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for coming this evening. Can anyone tell me with a degree of certainty how much the public safety building is going to cost from start to finish? Because I keep hearing that there's more increases on the horizon. Is that rumor, or is there any truth to this?
I don't think I would be the person to answer that, Councilor.
Well, Councilor, I don't think, the Commissioner, neither the Traffic Commissioner, is kind of prepared to answer that. I think what we might want to do is perhaps file another resolve and kind of put this to bed.
Tying into what Councilor Farwell said, I think we are going to need a menu of options, basically a menu of options, because we don't know where this thing, I don't believe we really know where the end is in sight on this project. So with regard to these streets, we're going to have to find different ways to save money if presented with increases. So I would just forewarn that we need to really compartmentalize this thing and have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, because there may be monies that need to be squeezed from one area in order to make things succeed in another area, like building this thing. Because my concern is that this is going to be the most expensive hole in the city of Brockton, and the taxpayers are going to be footing the bill for this, and I'd like to know how much the taxpayers are indeed going to pay for this thing before it's done. So.
I'll only say, Councilor, that if people are looking to make significant changes to the traffic pattern that was approved by the Traffic Commission, that would have to go back to the Traffic Commission for approval.
You're good, Councilor?
I'm good. I just wanted to make that point on the record, that we need to be aware of what these costs are going to be in every piece of this, in terms of every piece of this project, to find out how we are going to afford this thing and what is actually going to be the end result.
I understand, and I understand the frustrations that exist here. I'm frustrated about this myself, because every time we come to this meeting, is dish out another million, dish out another million, 2, 3, 4, 20,
exactly.
whatever. So that's
no one disputes that we don't need this building. The question is, it's getting this thing is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I don't know where the end is. I'm not sure anyone really knows.
Hopefully soon.
I hope so.
Anyone else? I would like to entertain a motion to recommend.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Just on the motion, and I spoke to the mayor about this recently, let's not forget that once the new public safety facility building is built, we have 7 Commercial Street to sell to offset some of the project costs. We also have the old fire department headquarters and I think fire alarm building, whatever it's called, over on Pleasant Street. So we've never really talked about the fact that we do have some offsets. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. A motion has been properly made and properly second. All those in favor of recommending it favorably to the council? All those opposed? Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight.
Number 11. Resolve, whereas the recruitment of professional, competent candidates for appointment to the police department is of critical importance for the public safety of the city. Now therefore be it resolved, Police Chief Brenda Perez and other appropriate staff be invited to a meeting of the City Council to discuss issues relating to the recruitment and retention of police candidates. Invited Chief Brenda Perez or designees, Sandy Chatton, HR Director or designees.
Welcome, Chief, and I do owe you a phone call.
Good evening, councilors, Mr. President. Thank you for having us tonight to discuss the challenges we're facing with recruitment and retention of police candidates. This isn't just a problem for the Brockton Police Department. It's something that many municipalities across the Commonwealth are dealing with. Before we dive into recruitment, I'd like to touch on our current staffing levels and demographics. Currently, the department has 24 vacancies. Of our current sworn officers, we have officers on long-term active military deployments and officers injured on duty. Approximately 22% of the authorized number of officers are not available to work at this time. Despite that, our commitment to maintain service levels remain, and I want to extend my heartfelt appreciation to the dedicated men and women of the Brockton Police Department for the work they do every day. Over the past 6-7 years, the department has made concerted efforts to ensure our police force mirrors the diversity of the community it serves. A community predominantly comprised of minorities. In a significant milestone, we were relieved of the Castro Beecher Decree in July of 2022, marking the culmination of 47 years of diligent efforts to rectify discriminatory hiring practices. Presently, 54% of our sworn officers are minorities, 15% of the workforce is female, and 15% holding supervisory roles, a remarkable achievement for just 6 years ago. Now our current recruitment efforts. We have been faced with an unprecedented scenario where our hiring list has been exhausted, a scenario unanticipated and unprecedented in Brockton history as far as we can determine. And Council, I don't know if you know anything differently. Despite our extensive outreach efforts targeting veterans, residents, non-residents alike, only 146 out of 728 individuals, or approximately 20% of our responded positively to our call to hire 30 new officers. As Sergeant Amaral recently remarked, "Chief, there's no one else we can call." Recognizing the importance of our service and the well-being of our officers, my team and I have dedicated 8 full-time background investigators to the task of hiring 30 officers. Given the time-intensive nature of background checks, we began the process well in advance of anticipated vacancies. Last year, we also explored lateral transfers as a means to expedite the process and save resources. However, logistical challenges arose, such as the reluctance for current chiefs to release candidates, or issues with residency requirements. The background process is lengthy, and the timeline for training new recruits is even longer. Our request for 30 new officers in September 2023 saw enter our first batch of recruits into the academy in 2024, and the next batch not anticipated to enter until June of 2024, almost a year later. I'd like to take an opportunity now to introduce Sergeant Amaral, who's going to delve into the process and address any questions when it comes to backgrounds, recruiting, and the process that we go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant?
Good evening. My name is Kevin Amaral. I work at the Brockton Police Department. One of my duties is recruiting and to supervise the background investigators. Last September, August, September, the chief tasked me with attempting to get 30 candidates to hire. We called civil service, and just to give a quick rundown of the hiring process, civil service conducts the tests every year, and our candidates are ranked based upon that, their scores. We call civil service for a list. They provide us one. We then have to have the list open to allow the candidates to come and sign for that list for about a week and a half. After that, we set up an orientation with these candidates. At the orientation, we provide them with an application packet. We give them about 2 weeks to complete their application packet. From there, we do their first interview, and it's only after that that we begin their background. Each background takes about 60 hours to complete. Some will take longer, some will take less, but on average, it is about 60 hours per candidate. After we have a candidate that we feel is capable of becoming a Brockton police officer, we then have a meeting with the mayor. Mayor approves. It's only after that that we can set up an appointment for a medical evaluation. That may take a couple weeks to get. We have to wait for those results to come back to us before we can set up a physical aptitude test. Only after we get those results can we sign someone up for the academy. The wait for the academy, it differs. At times, it can be a couple of months. Other times, it can be up to 4 or 5 months. On average, it takes about 6 months for this entire process to hire someone. With that being said, I wanted to discuss some of what has transpired since last September. 94 candidates claimed that they fit the residency preference with civil service. What that means is that when the person took the test, they lived in Brockton for 1 year prior to the exam. Those people automatically go to the top of the list. We prefer to hire Brockton residents. 94 candidates said that they fit that preference. However, only 59 of those candidates came in to sign that list. Of those 59 candidates, we gave or are anticipating to give 20 of those people conditional offers of employment. That's all we had for residents, 20 spots. From there, we needed to delve into the non-residents. I've been on the job for about 20 years. I don't ever recall us going into the non-residents. I know when I got hired, I was one of the last ones in my class. I scored a 99, and I barely got hired. We're exhausting the list of residents. As a matter of fact, we had exhausted the whole state list. 720 somewhat candidates said that they were willing to accept the position in Brockton. So we put out the call. Everyone come sign who wants to come sign. Of the 700 and something, only 88 candidates came to sign saying that they were willing to take the job. When they came to sign, I made them all aware that the City of Brockton does have a residency requirement. Right off the bat, 22 no-showed for their orientations. As we started the backgrounds on some of these people, another 12 decided to withdraw because of residency. They had already been rooted with their families in other communities. They weren't willing to uproot their families to bring them to Brockton. Of the non-residents, we ended up giving out 8 conditional offers of employment. Of those 8, 6 of them are actually already Brockton residents. They just didn't fit the residency requirement, living 1 year prior to the exam, so they were already here. That whole process with the non-residents, we only hired 2 people who are not a resident of Brockton. And I can tell you, during this process, quite out of the dozen that have decided not to move into Brockton withdrew. Some of them took positions with other agencies, or I want to say there was about 5 or 6 officers who we didn't need to send to the academy who decided to stay with their own agency instead of coming here because of residency. Brief overview. Any questions?
Councilor Farwell.
I'll be brief, colleagues. I file this because I think it's important we know where we are with recruitment, where we have so many vacancies. Sergeant, would you, if we have a residence preference through civil service, are we losing more qualified candidates? For example, could we have out-of-the-city candidates who score higher and perhaps have a more robust professional background to bring to the job as opposed to limiting ourselves to just city residents? Give me your sense of what we lose and what we gain.
We lost about 6 to 8 candidates that were either joining the state police or other police departments because they were not willing to move into the City of Brockton because they were rooted in their community.
And lateral transfers, Councilor Thompson and I are kind of interested in this subject. Lateral transfers, I take it residency obviously negatively affects.
That is correct. We did try to do lateral transfers in 2022, 2023. We had 13 applicants who actually showed interest. 2 big issues, number one, was we are a civil service department. The chief of the other department would have to okay that lateral transfer. A lot of chiefs were not willing to let the officers come to Brockton or to leave their agency. So that was a big issue. The other issue was residency. When people discovered that they would have to move into the city within 1 year, they weren't willing to move their family.
Councilors, I would just say, not for tonight, but I think we need to talk about the dynamics of police recruitment, how we can enhance our ability to attract highly qualified people. And with that, I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm done.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming. In terms of, I do have a few questions, but let me just start with this one. In terms of lateral transfer, right? Do you guys have anybody in the department right now that was serving somewhere else and come to Brockton and stay? And if yes, do we have anybody who transferred and left again?
So I guess your first question, do we have any officers who have left other departments to come to Brockton?
Yep.
Yes, we do. None of those have been through lateral transfers, though. All of them have been through the civil service hiring process. Off the top of my head, I could probably name half a dozen people who have come from other agencies into the city.
So do we have anybody who came from other agency, spent some time in Brockton and then left?
Yes, we do have one of our lateral transfers, the only lateral transfer who decided to come to Brockton, decided to leave immediately after. She was here for maybe a couple of months.
Do we know why?
The work between our department and her other agency was different. I don't think she was accustomed to city work.
So this was obviously not because of residency?
No, she was, actually, she was a resident of Brockton.
Excellent. So it's like, based on your statement, this individual left, whatever her department, come to Brockton, and then leave Brockton. And do you guys know where she went?
I do know where she went. She went to a smaller community than Brockton.
Is it the simplest she was
Came from? Yes, it is.
So it means that this officer is somebody that I would assume well respected if she is able to go back to the simplest that she left. So, so apparently this was not a residency problem. It means, based on what you said, it seems like maybe, the way of her working at at that time from a job is not the same as the city of Brockton. And given the fact that she's a resident in Brockton, I would assume that it would fit for this person to stay here, but apparently that's not the case.
With her specifically, no, it was not a residency issue at all. Not with her. With many others, it has been, though.
Can I ask the chief first? Can I ask you this question? So in regard to this particular situation, given the fact that this person left, did your office take some time to find out why she left, and was there anything that you guys could have done to keep her here?
We did have conversations with her, and I think the difference in what we were doing here in the city and what her previous department was doing is she preferred to go back to her previous department.
So, do you guys anticipate having the same problem with other people who might be willing to come here and coming here, right? And realizing that, well, what they were doing from their previous department is not the same as the city of Brockton. Obviously, I know some people here are very focused on residency, which I'm against. I believe that if you want to be a Brockton PD, you got to live here. That's my view, and that will not change. But based on that particular person, it seems like, this person lives in the city, and based on the information that I have, this person is driving at least more than half an hour to go to that department and coming here. So it would make sense for that person to stay here, and obviously, she chooses not to stay here. And it wasn't a residency because this person still lives in the city. So what I would like to understand is that, if we know that, this person left, which we can use as an example because of X, Y, and Z, are you planning on somewhat, I don't want to say change, but improve an environment where people can actually come and stay? Because retention is very important. And apparently, we had one and she left.
Right, but we also have a lot of hires that we've done that we've retained, and people have not left. So this is just another tool in the toolbox to be able to help with recruiting efforts. And so we always want to retain our officers for a long and illustrious and safe career. So that's not something that we're looking to, we don't want to see our officers leave, right? We want to keep our officers here.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. So, I mean, as somebody, this is for you too, as somebody who, lifelong resident of Brockton, I mean, obviously, I know how passionate you are about this department. And, the way I'm looking at it, right, it's like, if you don't have a stake in the game, in terms of, like, being a police officer, and I will say this tonight, I am willing to actually go different way for different departments, but not law enforcement, because I'll tell you why. Given the situation that we are dealing with in terms of our demographic, I believe that if we choose not to require, residency, I mean, obviously, we may have a lot of people, but my biggest fear is that, if you don't live here, but who cares? Maybe I'll come to Brockton, make my money, and go home. But I feel like even if you may not be a caring person, but if you live on a street as a Brockton police officer and you see something is going on, I believe that you have an obligation or more likely to do something. But given the fact that we have a history of hiring people and ask them to stay here, but if we just open the door and saying that, hey, you can come work for us, you don't have to live here, I mean, I think this is a recipe for disaster in terms of people not caring about our community. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I believe that we can hire people. Maybe we can lower the time that they have to be here. But the idea of get rid of it, I mean, as somebody, you've been in Brockton your entire life, you live here. If something is going on in your neighborhood, I'm assuming, you pay your dues. You've been there, I'm assuming after 7 years you can leave. So I would be more than happy to think of reducing it. But getting rid of it, I don't think that's fair to our resident, given the fact that we are dealing with the different types of demographic of people here. And at the end of the day, if you don't live here, you don't really know what's going on here. Yeah, you come to Brockton as a police officer to make your money, but guess what? At the end of the night or at the end of the day, you're going home. And we are talking about public safety. And for me, I think it's unthinkable. So like I said, I don't have any problem, and I think your men and women are amazing. They are doing an excellent job, and most of you, if not all of you, have been paying your dues. But the question is, how do we just, get rid of something like this when we know, and the city of Boston is having the same problem. I mean, this is like nationwide. It's not just the city of Brockton. I mean, I believe that, I'm sure it takes 60 hours to do a background check. Maybe we can find a way to reduce that. Maybe, there's possibility of learning from other departments in terms of what we can do. But I am all in favor of giving, the access, the ability, whatever our department needs to perform the job. But I am 100% against people not willing to live here. If you are willing, I was talking to somebody recently, Brockton is one of the best police department in the nation in terms of what we have, in terms of the money we are paying people. I was having this conversation with somebody. If you are willing to come to our city, getting our tax money, and you couldn't even care about staying here for like a couple of years, come on.
Well, and I think this is what this resolve is here for tonight, is for the elected officials to have that discussion.
Thank you, Chief. And I just want to make sure that people don't think I'm against like what's going on. I am 100% in favor of giving you guys the ammunition that you need to do your job.
And I appreciate the support, and my team appreciates the support.
100%.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Isaac.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Chief and Sergeant. Thank you for those, for the information. It's really eye-opening. So we've been talking about this for a while as well, that, you're having an issue with the hiring, hiring some police officers for whatever reason it may be. But with it being residency, I think, and I'm a big supporter of residency, but I've always believed that there are exceptions, and this for me is one of them. I've had many conversations with police officers over the years where they've said that sometimes it's very difficult for them to actually enforce the law in the city and then go home, where, people that they have actually, whether they've imprisoned them or ticketed them, they know where they live with their family. So I'm a big believer in that police officers should be able to live, outside of the city. So we need to help you build the police force, because obviously that's our biggest concern. We have to build it. So my question is, what's the next step? Maybe that's to our clerk. What do we need to do? Is this by ordinance? I know we changed it years ago where there's the 7 years that they are as, and then they can move out of the city. I don't remember how we changed that. Is it by ordinance?
No, the 7 years was negotiated. Union contracts take precedent over the city ordinance. I believe, but I would have to look into this, that you as a council can get rid of residency, although it was voted in by the voters on a ballot question. So I would have to do more research, but the 7 years, and I don't think the public understood this at the time, union contracts take precedent even over the vote that was on the ballot back in the 80s, I believe it was. So I'd have to do some research whether you can get rid of it yourself or whether it would have to go back on the ballot. But that 7-year number was negotiated by separate unions in different cases. That's where that came from.
Okay.
Because the union contract does take precedent over the even the ballot question.
Okay. So thank you if you can get that information to us, because I believe we've been talking about this for a while, and we need to get, men and women on the police force, and we need good, qualified, obviously always give priority to Brockton residents, but we don't want that to be what's holding you back. So whatever you need from our end, we support you, and I'll wait to get the information from our clerk. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Chief. Good evening, Sergeant. My view is we're in a crisis-level situation, 24 vacancies on the Brockton Police Department. How many times are we reaching out to Brockton Police asking for your assistance in a myriad of different constituent issues, downtown, disturbances, where I've been on the ride-alongs. It's from, one situation to another, to another, to another. And although you guys are doing an amazing job, you're physically short of people, and that has a huge impact on your ability to, to do your job and to provide the services that this city depends on. And so I understand, and Councilor Azak brought it up, and I agree that we have to do something about residency. The Brockton Police Department's crying out for it in a lot of ways. At least when I speak to other officers, and your presentation, both you, Chief and Sergeant, that residency is a huge impediment to meeting our staffing requirements. And so I think it's time for the city to have a conversation about about potentially putting a moratorium on the police residency requirement until we meet our proper staffing levels. And the reasons for residency, and I think Councilor Davenport brought up some of them, and I don't completely disagree. I think personally it's maybe a relic of the past. I don't see there's any data that says you're a more effective police officer because you live in the community in which you work. And there was some discussions that if the public is paying for your salary, then we prefer that you spend that salary in our community. Well, with the advent of Amazon and Walmart, Target, all these other large corporations, and the disappearance of the mom and pop, maybe that economic reason is not as valid today as it was 30 years ago. Everything's a balancing act. Even if those issues were valid today, which I think they're not as valid, we have to balance that against the crisis that we're facing in police staffing in Brockton. And so we bring up that this is that the City Council does not really have, from my discussions with you, Mr. Clerk, and our Legislative Council, that the City Council is limited in our ability to affect residency with the police department, because our powers within ordinance positions, and as you said before, these are union issues and not necessarily ordinance issues. If there are ordinance issues, then this council, I think, should act. If there are union issues, then Mr. Mayor, you're the one who would have the authority to negotiate those union contracts. So it'd be great to hear your opinion on this matter of would your administration contemplate negotiating a potential moratorium on the residency requirement for Brockton Police Department until at least we meet our full staffing requirements, because it sounds like it's a huge impediment, and it's important that we assist, this department.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before, we're not getting the talent here in Brockton, here at City Hall, and the school side as well, but here at City Hall that we should be attracting, right? People are not coming here. Recently, someone interviewed for a position in a department, and when they said you have to live in Brockton, they got up and left. So I think everything's on the table. I will tell you from a collective bargaining, we have negotiated in good faith. That did not come up at the table. The officers' patrolman's already been executed. Supervisors should be in the near future. So, I support having talented people here. I think it should be preferred, in my humble opinion. I think it should be preferred, not required. But again, I think any of us that are trying to attract people, and Chris Ships is here from HR on behalf of Sandy as well. I mean, your thoughts, you and I have talked about it quite a bit, and, and Sandy, I don't know if you want to opine on it, but I think, Council, everything should be on the table to try to get the best of the best here in Brockton.
Right, and even if it's not a complete termination of residency, maybe at least a moratorium until we get to our proper staffing levels, and then, maybe it reinstitutes, I don't know. I look at these other departments, and I know it seems like the largest union in our city, our teachers union, are not bound by a residency requirement. All of the ordinance positions that this council has been initiating, we're not requiring residency. We're putting in a Brockton preference. And I think we've had multiple department heads come before us seeking a waiver, and we've gladly granted them a waiver. I think we need to focus on the issue within the police department regarding their staffing issues. And, I don't think it's unreasonable to focus on the current emergency in staffing, and at least, if not an overall termination, a moratorium. And we bring up the issue, you were just discussing this other police officer who actually resides in Brockton but works in another city. So it's done in other cities. I mean, there are other municipalities that don't have a residency requirement in their police department. Am I correct, Chief? That'd be a factual statement, correct? So, I mean, maybe Brockton's got to start looking into it, because we demand so much from your department, and you just don't have enough people on the force. And this is going to be exacerbated over the next year. I've talked with police officers that 2004 or that 2004 class, large class, they're about to roll off the books in the next year. So it's just going to exacerbate the problem that we have, and we need to act now.
And that's why, Councilor, we have 24 openings right now, but we asked for to hire 30 people, anticipating those vacancies, because the process is so long in trying to mitigate that and shorten the time.
Yeah.
And we'll not wait until they leave to be hiring people and getting that process started.
Right, and I agree with that, with that strategy. To my fellow councilors, to the mayor, to everybody watching, our police department is asking for help, and I think it's our duty to help them. And so any way we can make that happen, I'm on board. I appreciate you guys coming here tonight. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Griffin.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
Good evening, Sergeant. I support getting rid of the residency for police officers for several reasons. Number one, they already have preference for residents in the civil service exam. They're going to get, shows everything being equal over someone who lives out of town. So that's already taken care of. But with the residence requirement, we're really limiting ourselves to the availability of lateral transfers. Chief, what does it cost for you to send a recruit to the academy? Just the academic side of it, not the equipment.
$2,000?
Okay. Now, when you take that out over 20, 30 people, that turns into a lot of money.
Well, the outfit of the equipment and...
Correct. How many, now, there's also another issue here, too. Your staffing is very, very low, should be increased exponentially. Today, how many of your officers today were forced to work an overtime shift?
Currently today, I don't believe any right now.
On average, I guess.
On average, we have had forced overtime because we're shorthanded. As to the exact number, as far as like last year or this year, so far I don't have. However, that does take a toll on the health and wellness of our officers and something that I'm always concerned about.
Yeah, that is a big, big problem. I know several of your officers. I talk to them quite often, and it's hard on them, it's hard on their families. It also sets them up where, obviously, any job you have, 8 hours, you're demanded to work 16 hours. It can happen several days a week. You're not going to be as sharp as you are. No one in this room is going to be as sharp as you are. I think as a city, we owe it to our public safety officials, police and fire, to protect their safety, because that's what they do for us 24/7, and I don't see any need for residency at all for police officers in Brockton going forward. I would hope my other council would support me in this also. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Sergeant. Thank the men of the women of the Brockton PD for all they do.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not getting into the residency debate, I've just got one question. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Sergeant, for being here. Thank you, Mr. Ships. Sergeant, one quick question. For the folks at home who might be interested in this conversation or in joining the Brockton Police Department, when is the next test?
We just had our test. First test happened this past Saturday. Next test will be next year. We did post on our social media, and we will post on our social media, usually right around December, that the test opens up, the application opens up in January and will last until the end of February.
Okay, perfect. So people who are interested can follow BPD on social media, and civil service will probably post their own updates.
Correct. And if someone can't afford the fee for the exam, there is a waiver application through civil service, and they will waive that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor, you interested? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. Can I pull you over?
Absolutely. Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Good evening, Chief and Sergeant. I will be very brief. Let me pull this closer to make sure you can hear me. In 2009, then Mayor Belzotti commissioned an audit of the city by the Department of Revenue, and I have the resulting report. Back in 2009, the DOR advised one of their strongest suggestions was for the city to release the residency requirement so as to attract the best talent, given the size of the city and its needs. I personally support that. I prefer to incentivize residency as opposed to penalizing it. And of course, it's imperative that for our residents as well as for our other police officers, that your staffing be adequate. You have the number of people that you need. I've also ridden on a shift in the longest 8 hours of my life. And I see all that the Brockton Police do. I would support a study. In Ward 4, at least, there are still a lot of residents who support residency, perhaps not understanding the shortcomings of it. So I would support a study to look at the entire city and whether residency is past its prime here. But in any event, I do support all of you. I will do whatever I can to help you. You need more police officers. And thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Councilor Texiero, who's not here, so we're going to have to go back to, I guess that's it.
See the motion.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion has been properly made in second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you, Chief, and apologies for keeping you late.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. The item that we moved from the beginning, number
Item 3, ordered that the City of Brockton appropriates the amount of $2,500,000 to pay costs of a feasibility study related to options for reconstructing the existing Brockton High School and/or construction of a new Brockton High School at 470 Forest Avenue in Brockton, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, and for which the city may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA. Said amounts be expended under the direction of the School Building Committee. To meet this appropriation, the city treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The city acknowledges that the MSBA's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any cost the city incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the city, and that the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this order shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the feasibility study agreement that may be executed between the city and the MSBA. Further ordered that the city treasurer is authorized to file an application with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Municipal Finance Oversight Board to qualify under Mass General Law, Chapter 44A, any and all bonds or notes of the city authorized by this vote, and to provide such information and execute such documents as the Municipal Finance Oversight Board of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts may require. Invited, Mayor Robert Sullivan, Martin Brophy, City Treasurer, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Dr. James Cobbs, Acting Superintendent.
Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I do want to first of all recognize and thank all of the Brockton School Committee members here, Vice Chair Tony Rodriguez, School Committee members Joyce Azak, Claudio Gomes, Anna Oliver, Kathy Ehlers, Tim Sullivan, and Judy Sullivan, and of course Dr. Jim Cobbs, our Acting Superintendent. As you may recall, we had a pretty in-depth conversation here in the chambers on February 5th. But I also want to let you know, since that time, it's really extremely difficult time financially. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We all know this. It's extremely difficult time. But I also want to tell you that the city and schools are working to stabilize and secure our financial situation and our position, with also the help of our state partners. We're having regular conversations with DOR, with DESE. We've already met with the Secretary of A&F and the Secretary of EOE, and we'll be going back into Boston again this week to talk to those same folks as well on Thursday. But I want to let you know that, as I said, on that night, February 5th, this is an opportunity that doesn't come around too often. It took us three bites of the apple to even be qualified for the eligibility. But that night on February 5th, I was asked by this esteemed body a couple different points. And I first of all want to give a shout out to the city clerk and his team, because as if you may recall, I stated that night that every other month I have to give an update to Allison Sullivan at the MSBA. Ms. Sullivan's assigned to the city of Brockton. And I also told you that night that we have to provide a timeline to the MSBA with second reading, third reading, posted notice in the enterprise, and then a final passage. And so the original timeline had to be changed and modified because of the postponement, which I fully supported. But I want to thank again Mr. Cruz, the clerk, and his team, Diane and everybody, because we needed to come up with an adjusted timeline, and we did that, and we provided it last week to Ms. Sullivan at the MSBA. But as I recall, two of the points that were asked that night of me as the mayor is if additional city councilors can be added to the school building committee. And I did not know the answer, but I know it now. Yes is the answer. That week after we met, I had a Zoom with some MSBA folks. I needed to modify it anyhow because the original letter listed Councilor Nicastro as the council president, and of course now it'll be Councilor Rodriguez in that position. So the answer to that question is yes, I can add additional elected officials, school committee members, city council members as well. Also, I was asked by that time on that night if I could give an update relative to the investigation on the city side, which I know I'm not involved in, but you were recently giving an update by the city solicitor, is my understanding. And then also on the audit side, RSM is the audit committee that was selected by the school committee, and we also had 3 community members. And as I told you that night, Attorney Bridges is dealing on the city side. Attorney Sarah Sparterford, who works for Murphy Hesse, is assigned legal counsel to the school committee body, and Sarah is assigned working with RSM. So I asked her today, knowing I was coming here tonight, if I could get an update, and she did email me an update, and I can forward it to you, but I want to read it to you right now. Again, progress to date, this is RSM. Connected with interim superintendent Jim Cobbs and identified key people in each department necessary to complete our work. Met with BPS IT department to discuss IT environment, available info, and how to access data. Met with city IT department to discuss access to Munis accounting system. Requested access, expected to receive access by the end of this week. Meeting scheduled this week with the interim school business administrator, and on the city side, the interim city auditor. ETA, in terms of when they expect to come up with some conclusions. Assuming we are able to get access to the Munis system and info requests are fulfilled in reasonable time frame, we expect to complete our analysis and have initial reports in mid-April. This is approximately 3 weeks timeline that we expect to receive the info and be able to do their analysis. So in terms of the audit update, that is news to you. But really what's important is something that I wanted to share with you today. I called Mary Piketty. You may recall that name. I mentioned it to you on February 5th. She's the executive director of the MSBA. And as you recall, I needed to get an extension. The city needed to get an extension. Ms. Piketty, in her capacity, could give us by law 30 days. And then on December 13th, myself, that time Kathy Ehlers and Jim Cobbs and Troy Clarkson spent 3 hours on Zoom with the board of the MSBA, and they gave us another extension through June 5 of 2024. The question I asked the executive director is as follows. Relative to the $2.5 million feasibility study, MSBA, will they reimburse us the 80%? Meaning, would we get about $2 million of the 2.5? Her response was, MSBA will reimburse eligible costs of the 2.5 million at the 80%. As feasibility study progresses, city is allowed to seek reimbursement monthly from the MSBA. It's called the pay-as-you-go program, as opposed to we don't need to finish the feasibility study and then seek reimbursement. So I know one of the councilors asked me, what is an eligible cost? What is an ineligible cost? I've been told that on the feasibility, not on the construction, feasibility, pretty much everything is going to be deemed as eligible, except for legal services, and if there's something that's not expected or is outside of the scope of the feasibility. So the request before you tonight, and it is a terrible time, but I also know that we have an opportunity for the future of Brockton High School students and staff. It was built in 1970. Which is pretty old, as you know. That's the year I was born. So I'm here tonight to humbly ask for your support on this endeavor. I do want to thank all the school committee members. Dr. Cobbs is here to answer any questions. Marty Brophy, the treasurer, is here, and of course Troy Clarkson in his capacity to hear. We also, and I asked Troy last Friday, we were notified. It's all about transparency. We were notified because of the financial situation that we're going on in totality, city and school. We're on a credit watch right now by S&P, and we'll have a call with Moody's as well. As soon as I was notified Friday afternoon, I asked Mr. Clarkson, send it to the city council, send it to the school committee, send it to the state delegation. So, you know, if our credit rating changes, again, what you said, Councilor, the interest rates would go up. We have stellar credit. That's why we were able to lock in at 2.5% at the 98 million. But I'm here to answer any questions, as is Jim and Troy and Marty. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilors, I just want to remind everybody that we killed this horse the last time that this came through. So unless we have some legit new questions, and I think a lot of the questions that we had the last time we met has been answered, which was the how much input we actually would bring into this specific process. I think that was answered pretty well. And the reimbursement piece was also answered pretty well. So let's try to stay focused on this so that we're not here beyond today's date. I have Councillor Azak, followed by Thompson and Derenoncourt and Fawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So back in February, when I had hoped that this would get postponed instead of getting voted against, I was hoping we'd be in a different situation. The situation isn't as good as I was hoping it would be. But Nonetheless, I've thought a lot about this, and I've received many calls from constituents, and my business mind says we can't do this, but my heart says we have to. So that's why I'm going to keep it very brief, and I will be supporting this because we have to do it. If we don't, then I think we'll regret it. So I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
I do also want to thank the President. A lot of you know Dan Plata as the ARPA manager. We asked the President if Dan could be here tonight. He has done a ton of projects throughout the Commonwealth with MSBA. And also another gentleman that has done, he used to work for MSBA. You met him recently, Kevin Sullivan, who works for CHA now. I've called him to get some information as well from MSBA. But Dan is here as well, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Madam, you're all set?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
I'll try to be brief as well. I think I made my position on this pretty clear at our last meeting. I completely and fully support moving forward with the feasibility study. Honestly, I just want to thank the community for the outpour of comments on this issue. I can't remember another matter before us that there was this level of engagement privately in support of the feasibility study. And, you know, we just in our last agenda item, or the one before speaking about the public safety complex, where there was a huge need for the public safety complex due to the material condition of our police department and our Station 1, and that we said due to that material condition, you know, we should provide them newer facility, and that they deserve, I believe the word was they deserve a newer facility. Our children do as well. They deserve it. And so I just hope that this council finds it wise to move forward this feasibility study. This is our one and only shot, probably in the next generation, to receive this grant. And I just think it's in the best interest of the city, the best interest of our children. I wholeheartedly support it, and I ask that this council do as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor,
Councilor.
I think Councilor Azak said it best. Your head tells you you probably don't want to do this, but your heart tells you you have to. But there are some things that have changed since we were here in February, and one of them was the report by Open Architects. So, and this is more for public consumption, not for you. We have a deficit from FY23 for the schools. We don't know the full extent of that yet. We have a projected deficit of 19 to 25 million for FY24, and we have a projected deficit for fiscal year 25. And frankly, and this is not targeted at you as chair of the school committee, I just don't get the sense that the magnitude of this issue has sunk into the people who need to make decisions. I'm probably the only one here in this room who lived through a financial control board and the $14 million deficit that existed back in 1990. It's why I ran for mayor, and it's why I actually enjoyed working with the Financial Control Board, because I learned a great deal from the people who were part of the state-imposed Financial Control Board. But I don't get the sense that even after September 1st, when we knew that there was a deficit in fiscal year 23, did anybody order the superintendent to immediately undertake a review of non-teaching staff to see if layoffs could be implemented to offset the deficit? Did anyone think about looking at bus routes and student passenger counts to see if bus routes could be combined and we might save on labor costs and operational costs? I just don't see that anything's changed other than Superintendent Thomas is on a paid leave, Mr. Petronio is on a paid leave, and Mr. Correa is on a paid leave. Everything else seems to be rolling along normally. Nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. And I can assure you that when you go into Boston and they start drilling down on what is going to happen to the city and how they're going to help us, there are going to have to be some tough questions and tough decisions made. Now, you may think that, a lot of people here may think that I'm being overly critical. So I'm just going to close with this. I happened to look at the bpsma.org website. We now have 2 people working in communications and marketing. We just hired on February 28th, 2024, a gentleman to do marketing and communications for $105,000. What does it take to wake up people? What does it take to impress upon people that the only way you get out of a financial quagmire, deficit, however you want to describe it, is a team effort? And that means that part of the team has to make some tough decisions, including staff reductions, and I'm not talking about teachers. There has to be a recognition that you're in a fight for the city's financial health. So having said all of that, I'm going to support this because I want you to have the options you need to take a look at a feasibility study and see what might need to be done at the high school and what it's going to cost us. But I'm going to tell you that we are heading on the wrong trajectory if the people who are decision makers don't step up to the plate. And I'm not singling out you. You've got 7 other committee members. You've got a superintendent. If those individuals who have the control over the school department, where the major problems exist in FY23, FY24, and FY25, then I don't see us getting out of the situation as we did many, many years ago with primarily Mr. Condon's leadership. So I just implore you, yes, the council will help the school department. Yes, we believe in children. Yes, we will do everything we can, but we also have to protect the community as a whole. We have to protect the city's finances. It affects our ability to borrow. It affects our infrastructure, whether we can make the repairs that are needed. It affects property values. So I'm not lecturing to you. I have far too much respect for you as the mayor and as a friend, but I think you know where I'm coming from. I mean, you have an expression, due diligence and all hands on deck, and that's where we are if we're going to get out of the situation we're in. So you certainly have my favorable vote tonight, and you'll have it on Monday, but please, please, this is a team effort to get us off the situation in which we find ourselves and back to where we want to be as a city with a proper bond rating. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor.
Duranencourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just keep this short. Also, I do have a question for Mr. Clarkson. You know, for the sake of our city and for the sake of our students, I will vote yes on this. I just want to make this clear for the record. But before I do so, I would like to ask Mr. Clarkson this question.
You'll be kind to him, won't you?
I'm always kind, Councilor. Mr. Clarkson, you know, in regard to the last conversation that we had, you know, a couple weeks ago, you know, before I asked about the budget, which you provided detailed information, which was great, what have you provided to show the budget to actually report for the school department? I understand that the school budget is not as detailed as the city budget, but I would like to know where you were appointed as CFO to oversee the school budget. Have you on a monthly budget which shows the total amount of expenses each month? If yes, what month did the school start overspending the budget? Were you tracking it?
So the answer is yes, we have. Soon after, I was asked by the superintendent and the mayor to take a greater role in the oversight of the schools. We began providing to the school committee at every meeting a report reflecting the spending on the school budget in Munis. But as I've discussed publicly here at the City Council and at the school committee, one of the challenges we've faced is, and when I say we, I mean myself and the people that were brought in at the schools and the consultant open architects, that what's reflected in Munis does not reflect the totality and the departmental spending. And so a huge part of what Open Architects has been doing, first on behalf of DESE and now working directly with the Brockton Public Schools, is to create a budget that better reflects how they are spending the money so that they and we can more accurately report that to you.
So, like, do you know on top of your head which month that the school was overspending? That was my second question to you.
So It was in early August of last year. The mayor and I had a conversation with the superintendent and the school CFO where they expressed concerns about the fiscal year 23 budget.
So after you were appointed as CFO, I mean, given the situation that we are dealing with, so you did have a monthly report of what was going on in our school system?
No.
Why not?
That's an excellent question, Councilor. I was asked a similar question by Councilor Nicastro when she was council president, and I'll give you the same answer now that I gave to her and the entire council then. I think oversight of my position of the school operations is a very reasonable interpretation of Chapter 324. What I can tell you is that in my tenure here, I've worked with 3 mayors, 2 of them here in this room, and that is not the model that I've been working under since I came here.
No, I mean, I completely, understand what you are trying to convey. So anything before August, I will leave it there. So the question is, once we know what has been going on, I mean, given the fact that we are dealing with the mess right now, which you were authorized, I wasn't here, to take over. My question to you, what have you done?
Well,
No, not in terms of what have you done literally, but in a monthly basis, in terms of either meeting with the mayor, this is what has been going on. And that's why I ask you, which month that you saw from that point on. I'm talking about currently, though, because the deficit is going on. I mean, it doesn't stop. It's going on as we speak. Like, what have you done from that day that you were appointed to oversee this budget, given the fact that the CFO from the school is not there, the deputy, I mean, the assistant CFO is not there. So technically, it becomes your responsibility as the CFO. This is your job.
So I would submit to you, Councilor, that the effort not only of myself, of my team, of the interim school business manager that's brought in has been daily and extensive. I just reported to you that we began reporting to the school committee at every one of their meetings, providing them with a report on the spending. We began meeting with departments to try to understand, for instance, transportation costs and some of the personnel costs. We immediately began to work with them to refine and improve some of the workflows that they have and the way that they hired. We implemented position control where Dr. Cobbs and I weighed in on every position that was hired. So I think to explain to you and the council everything that the city has done to try to work with the schools and provide greater accountability could last us till midnight. So I would submit to you, Councilor, that our work has been thorough and extensive and reaches across all operations in the school department.
Okay, so we're not gonna, I mean, I don't want to be here midnight. I'm exhausted.
Good. You have my full agreement on that, Councilor.
Let me just put it to you like this. For the sake of time, here's what I would like to request from you. From August to present, I would like you to send a report of what you've done on a monthly basis to me, or you can send it to whomever you want to. I would like to see this. From the day that you were put in charge to oversee, which is a mess that we are dealing with, I would like to see that document. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Cobb, can I speak to you, please?
Good evening.
Sir, how are you?
I'm well. How are you tonight?
Thank you. I just have a few questions. I know Open Architects and Mr. Clarkson made recommendations in a report. I'm going to go through them. The in-house transportation costs, whether it's more feasible to go back to a contracted service versus having our own transportation company. The 100-plus individual contracts, whether they're going to be eliminated or changed to some degree. Also how the grants are being used. Grants were expired, still occurring cost. Recommendations were made to end them as of March 15th. And the possibility of hiring a full-time procurement professional to handle these problems and issues for the school department. Have you, as you stand here today, received direction from the school committee to research these things and maybe implement some of them?
Yes.
Okay, how far along are we?
We are in the process of having an audit for transportation. We've done a lot of meetings, as Troy said already, with the transportation department to cut expenses, specifically overtime, which is kind of out of control, so that's under control. We've eliminated some positions in the transportation department. We're looking at the vendor list, so we plan to go to a master vendor list where it specifies the routes and the cost. And we're working with our transportation department and our bus provider to look at the bus fleet, to give us analysis of the bus fleet and what we actually need to do the job better than what we've been doing right now, which includes purchasing more buses. I am not in favor of going back to contracting services out.
Whatever's the cheapest, that's all I'm looking to do.
But
Because, like I
we
said,
can realize a lot of cost saving by not doing that and continuing to be in control of our
as long as you look at it and how the numbers come out, the numbers come out. I'm
Right,
with you
exactly.
100% on that. And I appreciate the efforts you're doing this. Because I think everybody here is in favor of a new high school. But the harsh reality is we have to really stave off the overspending in the school department and in the city as a whole, to be quite frank. But the other side of this is we go through with this process. We get the 80% reimbursement. We're still on the hook for 20%. I'm guessing, talking to Troy, that's somewhere between $200 and $400 million. That comes on us, guys. We're going to have to really increase the development in this city, commercial, sustainable tax revenue we're going to have to get. So projects like the fairgrounds, I'm not talking about buying the fairgrounds, but helping the owners develop that is going to be essential to this project and other projects that we're in. The CSX project, that's also another opportunity where the city could possibly get some revenue, or that's a little bit further in horizon, just due to the mitigation of the environmental problems that can be there in dealing with CSX. We also have the Kmart Plaza, which could give us some sustainable revenue if we can develop it properly. The Bargainier. So my point is, everything's on the table. Everybody here wants a new high school for the kids. And I know things have been really tough with the schools lately. You're doing a good job trying to work it through, and I appreciate everything. But the harsh reality is we really have to work as a team to get these cost overruns under control. And we as a city and as a body have to really look at increasing the development in this city and build a way out of this deficit. I support this for tonight, and I encourage my other fellow councils also support it. Dr. Cobb, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you,
So,
Councilor.
if I may, something I'm here. So
Absolutely.
This, when we say 3 times we submitted, this is what it looks like. And the "we" is me, okay? And I brought this, not so much for a show, but to make you understand that I started in 2019. When everybody was home during the pandemic, I was at Brockton High School, walking through and taking pictures and creating these SOIs. This is what they are, the Statement of Interest. So a lot of work has gone into it. We finally were accepted in 2022. So for the last 2 years, I've been working with the MSBA on site and walking through with the senior team to understand the project and continue with the submittal. With that said, I would encourage you, again, Mr. Thompson, thank you, to separate Brockton High School, the institution, from Brockton High School, the building. It's 2 different things, okay? The children deserve a better high school. Regardless of what the behavior is going on for some of the students in the building right now, it really has no bearing on whether or not the building is sufficient for learning environment for the students. Okay, so I want you to understand that, so you're not voting for, because there's bad behavior and some students are putting us in the news all the time, that the students don't deserve a proper learning environment like many of the people in the school systems around us in the Plymouth County have already done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cobbs. I believe I have Councilor Minichiello, Nicastro, Lally, and now Madam Tavares. Councilor Minichiello.
Good evening. Dr. Cobbs, could I ask you a couple of questions, please?
Councilor Minichiello, I just hope you remember that you're no longer in the school committee, right?
I remember, but my heart goes to the students. Good evening, Mr. Cobbs. How are you?
Dr. Cobbs, thank you.
The community needs this. Our students need this. I don't care if it's for. I don't care if 80% of the kids are acting up. The 20% that are doing the right thing and want to take advantage of what Brockton has to offer, the opportunity. Brockton basically provides kids with that opportunity to succeed. We all know that. And that's why the school system is so near and dear to all of our hearts here. Every single counselor wants to support the schools. We all do. It's just that obviously when we ask a question like, okay, for now this year, 2024, where are we? Where are we with the budget? And we can't get an answer.
I can help you with that.
Okay, beautiful. I'm glad. Because, so if I ask the question today, where are we in terms of a potential deficit, or is there no deficit for 2024? What is the status of this deficit, of this alleged deficit?
Well, I'm sure my colleague Troy can help us, but as it stands right now, again, we looked at a $14 million deficit, and we have been working with Open Architects and Troy and his team to identify cost-cutting measures that we can use to mitigate that $14 million. We have several things, but essentially my team and my cabinet team, we've been working diligently. So over the weekend, I think we've gotten that $14 million. We reduced it by $10 million. We expect finally the MOE maintenance effort, which is the IDA grant for special education needs. We expect that to contribute another $3.6 million. So, there's other savings that we're still working on, cost-cutting measures such as the private transportation, such as the position controls. So we expect to either close at a zero balance, or close with a slight deficit, or close with maybe a surplus. It could be $600,000 surplus. It could be $1 million deficit. So we're still working that out. But
are there presently cost controls or measures to make sure that things aren't going in the red? Because that was my understanding going forward when we found out about this in October of 2024. 23, sorry, yes, 2023. That was going to take place because obviously we know that the budget's complicated, but when you boil it down, 85% of this budget is personnel. So the question is, okay, 85% personnel, what are the budget sources for the funding of those personnel? Wrangle it in and basically draw it out. I don't care what you do, but organize it so that we know where the money's coming from in that 85%. There's subcategories of grants, of this, of that. We all know that. I know that. I'm not an accountant, but I know that in the general picture. And then 15% of fixed costs, paper, supplies, electricity, all that good stuff, fuel, all that good stuff. And then we have our non-net school spending that the city basically provides, the crossing guards, the buses, all this stuff. I mean, there's obviously some decisions that were made that have caused an increase. And there's some decisions that is no one's fault in terms of homeless kids. Where are some children coming from? Brockton having more than its fair share of a burden that should be dispersed throughout the entire Commonwealth, not just on urban cities like Brockton. That's a bigger picture, but there's some things that spending that I know in my heart are not the Brockton Public Schools problem. It's because of it's a macro problem that is affecting the whole state. I mean, with kids coming in from everywhere, and guess what? Brockton's getting more than their fair share and having to foot the burden for these kids. We always welcome these kids in, but we need some help here. But I digress. So, I mean,
I agree.
I know. We're on the same page, my friend.
So the bottom line is, Counselor, the bottom line is we need adequate funding for the school department. It's not enough funding. It hasn't been enough funding, and going forward, it has to be funded appropriately. That $15, $20 million is
Correct.
propagated
I agree there needs to be
every
adequate
year,
funding. I
so it
agree
has
with
to be
that.
funded.
However, there are decisions that have been made by, and I'm not going to blame the school committee on this. I'm going to look at the executive team and the high-paid administrators of the Brockton Public Schools who have made decisions that have impacted this school system. You know, everyone wants to lay the blame at the school committee. Well, they're not the experts making, $180,000, $150,000, $175,000. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, these people have jobs and are doing their best. And, so and I was one of them, and we were trying our best to do what we needed to do. I dealt with an $18 and $16 million deficit with Kathy Smith, and we did it. It was tough, but we did it. So I know how to do it. Okay, it's a matter of doing it, but. We need to get control over the budget, and I don't really see that anyone has yet in terms of really knowing where this money is going. I get it. We need adequate funding, but you've got to spend it responsibly. You don't shut down programs and then ship the kids out of the district.
Is there a question that you're asking me?
Sure, yes.
What's the question?
Okay, the question is, do we have adequate controls to make sure that we're not going over budget?
Absolutely, and I just stated some of them, and this team is working very hard to clean up the mess that we inherited, and we're doing the job, and that's
well, when we say we inherited, wasn't there was an entire team, there were many levels involved in this.
Well, I disagree with you because you don't, again, like you said, you're not one of the administrators, you're not on the team, and I attended many meetings.
Okay, very good. Okay. Fine. Look, I'm voting in favor. I'm voting in favor of this because look, I support the Brockton Public Schools. I always will. I support the community. But we need to do a better job. I do not see how we have a deficit of you think it's around $10, $11 million for fiscal 2024? I don't see how that could have happened. I really don't. I mean, that should not have happened, is my opinion, because we knew that there was a problem in 2023. That's a shame. That's shameful as far as I'm concerned. And so whoever was there and knew about it, hello, I mean, that's a problem. That's a major problem.
Couldn't agree with you more, but like I said, we're in the process of cleaning
we agree again. All right, my friend. All right.
We're the one that are doing the job to fix it, so, so I don't know what.
I'll have a cup of coffee with you anytime to discuss, and we can put our heads together, because guess what? We are in this together. We need to fix this mess. My friends on the school committee need they shouldn't be taking all the heat for all this. There's plenty of people that were involved in this thing that are spending more time and get paid really well, who just seem to have been skating and are going to be keeping all these big cushy jobs. And guess what? There should be accountability for them too. So I rest my case.
I'm glad you got all that stuff off, thinking that you're still in the school.
You had to get it off on me. I didn't cause this mess.
I had to get it off my chest.
Like I said, if you have a question for you, I'm happy to answer it. But
well, I was told by Dr. Cobbs that he's as available as available can be.
He always is. He's always been.
Anytime you have any questions or concerns,
always has been available.
Reach out. Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, gentlemen. I think my questions are mostly, or my comments are mostly financial. And we're going to be seeing Dr. Cobbs in early April. I've already spoken to him about the resolve that was filed with the council last week. And at that time, I'm sure we'll know even more about all of these issues that have just been briefly discussed. So, as you know, because I wrote to City Hall today, I was interested to see what has changed since this matter first came before the Finance Committee on February 5th. And the changes haven't been all that great. The Open Architects report came out with some staggering numbers in the millions, and the credit watch warning by Standard & Poor's came out last Friday, and that was scary but not unexpected. What hasn't changed? We haven't seen downsizing. We haven't seen a plan to address the out-of-control spending by the school department. Now, I understand there's one in the process, and it will be rolled out to the state on Thursday, and that's a good thing. But all of these very months do give the appearance of apathy, and that is greatly concerning because, you see, this group is sane. We are sane. Our job is to watch the money, to watch the purse, and we've all been beside ourselves privately and somewhat publicly too. I'm kind of known as the Ward 4 pothole lady, but I know that my job, according to the charter, is to watch the purse. And I've been watching very closely, and it's been troubling, and it has kept me up nights wondering, how will we ever carry all this debt on our backs? And the public safety building, and some of the other projects that we've talked about that we've longed for, and we want to advance. We will talk about those other things when Dr. Cobbs comes back. I have to tell you, I was prepared to vote against $2.5 million for a feasibility study, not because the children don't deserve it, not because the building isn't old and isn't falling down, but I was afraid of the numbers. The numbers scared me. And so when we found out this afternoon that MSBA will reimburse 80% of that $2.5 million, it's like a balm. It's like so good. $500,000 is a real lot of money. I'm not sure we have that, but we're more apt to have that than we are to have $2.5 million. And so for that reason, with the reimbursements bringing the number down, I'm going to support this. This is where my heart wants to go. My head is very concerned about the numbers, though. We all are. And there has to be some huge movement on the part of the school department, the school committee, everyone who has something to do with these huge numbers that have not abated in all these months since the $14.4 million came out. We can't take it more seriously. And here we are barreling down into budget season, and what is this all going to mean for us? We don't even know yet. I'm praying for you all. I'm wishing you all success in dealing with the state. I don't know how much the state will do for us. I know that the feds, Senator Markey, Congressman Lynch, both promised to do what they can for us in Washington. My God, they have so many problems of their own in Washington. I just want to say, I will support this tonight, but I'm really concerned. We have to see some change, some downsizing, some changes. And anything that we can do to help you, of course we will. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lally and then Tavares, and hopefully we're done with this issue.
Fingers crossed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clarkson, sorry you just sat down. I got one more. Just as a confirmation for all of our ease, just to confirm, you can say the school department and the city, on behalf of the schools, are going after every bit of grant and reimbursement and every scrap of change we can find?
Yes.
Okay. Like my colleague, Councilor Castro, said, given the financial concerns that the department sort of brought on the city and itself, the question of the feasibility study has been a pretty difficult one. It has been a huge relief to receive two pieces of information. Number one, that the MSBA will reimburse 80% of the feasibility study, even though it was indicated in meetings prior that as for the project itself, they may reimburse only up to 60%. 80% of the feasibility study is a very big deal. And the other piece of information that I think my colleagues and I are comforted by would be that this would be managed by a building committee and not left totally in the hands of the department, which was given everything else going on, a huge reservation for all of us. Given that this is a study, given that it is something that's going to take some time, and it is something that, resetting the process is going to do more harm than good. With that information in mind, I am comfortable voting for this. But I think the message from, my colleagues is that the situation as a whole is still deeply unsatisfactory. Downsizing came up, a top-heavy administration came up. As my colleague, Councilor Minicello, talked about, this came from the administration internally, and the legislature overseeing that can do quite a lot of work, but there are things that still can be kept, and that is something that you have to rely on having good people in all positions. You can't just bank on one or two. But I'll leave it with just, two final remarks. I've talked about this in accounts, I've talked about this here. I still want to see a definitive final ruling about all of these large leases that have been floating around that did not come to the council for a vote, which are all illegitimate. And a final note, because the public safety building did come up, I feel the need to mention that both the police station and the fire station are significantly older than the high school, have received far less renovation than the high school, and the entire project of merging these, despite all the overages discovered earlier, still come in far below the projected total of the high school. But I will be supporting the feasibility study this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tavares.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, is not even question, it's just comment. I know we cannot concentrate on the future and try to point finger and try to blame everybody. Our goal right now is to concentrate on the future. No one, to figure it out, how can we work together, not to let whatever happen, because whatever happened is happened. I understand everybody's frustrated, but in the day, it's just like we can't just turn the clock today and for tomorrow. Actually, we should concentrate on how can we work for future, not to let this happen again. To have literally plan details, organization, communication, and transparency, the way everyone gonna have access. If anything goes wrong, somebody gonna hey, this isn't so and so. And then the way we can work as a team together to kind of put the things in place on the right way. Because as we can see right now, the taxpayer right now is bleeding. We have so much problem right now. The taxes increase. We have a problem with housing. People move out of Brockton. And so much concern the taxpayer have. Like my colleague was just saying it, I think we should concentrate to try to focus for future, try to give people opportunity to build business or to welcome business, to see if we can have more business, try to raise the tax out of business, and then to give a resident a little break with the raising tax. Because the income, salary did not go up, but the expense is going like hell, it's going crazy. And as far as you can see, we have people every day move out of Brockton. It's just very sad. We didn't even have housing or place for people, middle class, to live here because they can't afford it. And then as of right now, we deal with a lot of private deficit. And it just doesn't make any sense. But we can fix this together. I think we can fix this together. We can work on this together. We can plan for this not to happen, whatever happened, and then we can do better. Like Susanna Cash, my colleague, just saying, she's worried about the big number we're gonna have. But, well, we can learn from our mistake, actually. We can just work together with these numbers and to improve with these numbers and to do well. I know if we work together, we have a better communication, we work as a team, we work with the taxpayer, we work with everybody, welcome more business. And because when we have more business, we raise the tax out of business, and then the business is going to give you more jobs opportunity. We can be very great. Brockton is the best place to live since I have come to Brockton. I love Brockton, and I love all the people, and then I wish we can work together. I wish we can not concentrate on the past, because past is already past. We have to concentrate on the future, and that's all I have for tonight. And then I hope, we do better for future. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would like to entertain a motion.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second. No one beats your liaison.
A motion has been properly made,
Second.
properly second. All those in favor of voting this forward?
Yes.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. Councilors, that concludes our agenda. Do we have any personal privileges or council recognition? I forgot, we can't say privileges anymore. Council recognition.
Yes.
Madam Councilor from Ward 4.
Thank you. Today I had the pleasure of attending an alcoholic license holders outreach that was held in the Buckley Center at Massasoit Community College. It was a terrific review of city ordinances and state laws on alcoholic sales. There were representatives from the Brockton License Commission there, the fire department, the police department, the building department, as well as the Massachusetts Alcoholics Beverage Commission. They all participated, they all gave presentations. I want to thank the business owners that attended and the managers of these businesses as well. By attending and showing they care about how our laws are carried out, they enhance the quality of life for our neighborhoods. And so it was a great opportunity. I hope they hold it again next year. Thank you to all.
Thank you, Councilor. Anybody else? Having heard no one asking for any time, I now adjourn this meeting. The meeting is adjourned. Good night, everybody.